Hello guys, welcome to Pika Fiction. So in this video, we will see what if Ash defeated Cynthia and she declared him her husband on live TV. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The Vow of Eternity. The air in Winden Stadium tasted of ozone and thunder. It was a flavor Ash Ketchum had come to know as intimately as the weight of Pikachu on his shoulder. 6 massive screens hung suspended over the battlefield, each displaying the same stark, unforgiving image, 5 grayed-out icons next to his name, and 5 beside Cynthia's. A perfect stalemate. The roar of 100,000 people was a physical pressure, a white noise hurricane that beat against the force field shimmering over the pitch. On the field below, the battle was anything but a stalemate. It was a maelstrom. Cynthia's Milotic, a creature of impossible grace and terrifying power, was coiled like a living mountain of pearl and sapphire. It had just dispatched Ash's Dragonite with a perfectly executed ice beam that had frozen the mighty dragon's wing mid-charge, sending him crashing to the earth in a shower of splintered ice. The referee's arm had sliced down, and another of Ash's icons had faded to gray. Cynthia stood on the far side of the field, a vision of calm and lethal elegance. Her long blonde hair was unmoved by the hurricane winds her Pokémon's attacks had whipped up. Her gray eyes, sharp enough to cut diamonds, were fixed on him. There was no triumph in them, only the cold, calculating focus of a master who had performed a necessary, expected function. She was the mountain, and he was the climber who had just lost his final handhold. That was what the world saw. But Ash wasn't looking at the world. He was looking at her, and he saw the faint sheen of sweat on her temple. He saw the almost imperceptible tension in her jaw. He had pushed her harder than anyone before, and he knew it. He could feel it. The energy of the stadium, the pressure, the expectations, they weren't just noise to him anymore. They were a current, and he was learning to swim in it. Milotic is unable to battle. Wait. That wasn't right. The referee's arm was still raised, pointing at his side of the field. The crowd's roar hadn't changed. But Ash had heard the words as clearly as if they'd been whispered in his ear. It wasn't a sound. It was a feeling, a certainty. An opening. He didn't shout. He didn't even move his lips. He simply focused, pushing a single, coherent thought forward like a thrown spear. Now, Surfetched. The opening is now. On the sideline, his gallant duck Pokémon, battered but not broken, snapped to attention. Its eyes, for a split second, flashed with a brilliant, azure light. It was a flicker so fast the broadcast cameras would miss it, a detail so minute only someone looking for it would ever see. Cynthia's brow furrowed slightly. She'd seen it. Surfetched hefted its massive leek lance and shield, its posture shifting from weary readiness to explosive intent. It hadn't received a verbal command. It hadn't even received a gesture. It simply moved. Surfetched, stand by. Ash called out, a fraction of a second after his Pokémon had already begun its charge. He had to maintain appearances. The world wasn't ready for what he was becoming. Milotic, block with hydro pump. Cynthia commanded, her voice crisp and authoritative, betraying none of the surprise she must have felt. The great sea serpent opened its maw, and a torrent of pressurized water erupted, a blue-white cannonball aimed to blast Surfetched off its feet. But the duck was already moving, not at the jet of water, but to the side, its feet a blur. It was tracing a path Ash had seen in his mind's eye a moment before, a path that hugged the very edge of the hydro pump splash zone. It was a path of impossible precision. Meteor assault. Ash yelled, his voice now a true command, a reinforcement of the will he had already projected. Surfetched didn't need the encouragement. It was already leaping, its leek glowing with a ferocious, martial light. It spun through the air, an avenging knight, and brought the lance down not on Milotic's head, but on the precise spot on the ground behind the serpent. The impact shattered the turf, sending a shockwave of force and a spray of earth upwards. It wasn't an attack. It was a lever. The shockwave buckled the ground beneath Milotic, disrupting its elegant coil and forcing its head to dip for a fraction of a second. And that was the opening. Now. The thought was a razor's edge. Surfetched landed, pivoted, and swung its shield like a discus. It slammed into Milotic's jaw with a sickening crack, the follow-through from an attack that had been planned 3 steps in advance. The beautiful Pokémon shuddered, its eyes losing focus, and with a final, mournful cry, it collapsed into the churning water of the battlefield's pool. The referee's arm shot up, this time pointed at Cynthia. Milotic is unable to battle. The stadium's roar shifted in tone, from a general clamor to a sharp, unified cry of shock and excitement. On the giant screens, one of Cynthia's icons grayed out, joining the 3 others already dark. 4 down. 2 to go. Cynthia stared, her perfect composure finally showing a hairline crack. She recalled her Milotic, her movements still graceful but now tinged with a new, sharp economy. She wasn't just fighting a talented trainer anymore. She was fighting a phenomenon. Her eyes met Ash's across the ruined field, and for the first time, he saw not a rival, but a question in her gaze. "What are you?" He gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod, a silent acknowledgement. "Let's find out." He recalled Surfetched, the flicker of blue aura in its eyes now a steady, low-burning flame. "This is unprecedented," the announcer's voice boomed, laced with giddy disbelief. "Ash Ketchum, the dark horse from Pallet Town, has just tied the score against the undefeatable champion Cynthia. Both trainers are down to their final 2 Pokémon in a battle that will surely go down in history." Cynthia reached for her next Pokeball. Her movements were deliberate, her face a mask of intense concentration. She was recalculating, reassessing her entire strategy. He had disrupted her rhythm, not with raw power, but with a form of tactical prescience she couldn't predict. It was like playing chess against an opponent who knew your moves before you made them. "Your bond with your Pokémon is remarkable," she said, her voice carrying across the field, a rare moment of direct address mid-battle. It wasn't a compliment. It was a statement of fact, an observation from a scientist who had just discovered a new law of physics. "We've been through a lot," Ash replied, his hand resting on the smooth surface of his next choice. The sphere was cool against his skin, but inside, he could feel a familiar, pulsing warmth. A connection. "Let's see how it holds up against this," Cynthia stated, and threw her Pokeball. The creature that emerged was a nightmare-given form. Spiritome. 108 spirits bound to a single, keystone-like rock, its ghastly purple face twisted in a permanent, spectral leer. A wave of oppressive energy rolled off it, a chill that had nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with the sheer wrongness of its existence. The crowd murmured, a collective shiver running through the stands. Spiritome was one of Cynthia's most notoriously difficult Pokémon, a master of status effects and psychological warfare. Ash felt the wave of dread wash over him, but it felt distant. Muted. A shield of calm, born of his own energy, stood between him and the ghost's oppressive aura. He took a breath, closed his eyes, and reached for the bond with his partner. "Easy, Lucario. It's just noise. We are the signal." He threw his own ball. Lucario materialized in a flash of light, landing in a low crouch, its crimson eyes already locked on the Spiritome. The aura-sensitive Pokémon stood perfectly still, its senses extending, reading the battlefield. A faint, shimmering outline of blue energy, visible only to Ash, enveloped it. "A classic matchup," the announcer exclaimed. "Aura versus the spectral plane. Lucario versus Spiritome. Spiritome, Dark Pulse." Cynthia commanded instantly. The spectral vortex on Spiritome's face swirled, and it spat a torrent of concentric, shadowy rings. The attack wasn't just physical, it was designed to cause flinching, to break an opponent's will. Ash felt the attack coming through Lucario's senses. He felt the malice, the intent to cause fear. He didn't issue a command. He shared a vision. The gap, Lucario. Between the second and third ring. Jump. Lucario moved. It wasn't a dodge. It was a flow. It leaped into the air, its body twisting like a contortionist, passing through the one safe corridor in the wave of darkness. It landed silently, its paws making no sound on the turf. Cynthia's eyes widened. That wasn't a trained reaction. It was instinct. Impossible instinct. Now, Aura Sphere. Ash commanded, his voice ringing with power. Lucario thrust its paws together, and a ball of crackling blue energy materialized between them. But it was different. It wasn't just Lucario's energy. Ash was feeding it, pouring his own essence, his own will, into the attack. The sphere grew, its light pulsating in time with his own heartbeat. It was brighter, denser, more intensely alive than any aura sphere he had ever created. Hypnosis. Cynthia countered, her voice sharp with urgency. Spiritome's face swirled with psychedelic energy, a wave of soporific power washing towards Lucario. But it was like throwing a pebble into a tidal wave. The sheer output of focused life force from the aura sphere acted as a shield, burning the hypnosis away before it could even get close. It's no use. Ash declared, a warrior's cry. This is our power. Fire. Lucario roared, a sound that was both canine and something more, something ancient. It launched the sphere. The attack didn't just fly, it tore through the air, leaving a shimmering blue trail in its wake. It struck Spiritome dead center. The result was not an explosion. It was a purification. The chaotic, ghostly energy of Spiritome was momentarily overwhelmed, silenced by the pure, concentrated essence of life. The 108 spirits within the keystone seemed to cry out, not in pain, but in a strange, fleeting moment of peace. The Pokémon was blasted backward, tumbling through the air before slamming into the stadium wall just below Cynthia's platform. It slid to the ground, its spectral face flickering and weak. Spiritome is unable to battle. Dead silence. Then, the stadium exploded. The sound was deafening, a physical blow. The impossible had happened again. Ash Ketchum had not just defeated Spiritome, he had dominated it. He had taken one of the champion's signature Pokémon, a creature famed for its tricky, indomitable nature, and had blown it away with a single, overwhelming show of force. On the giant screens, Cynthia's fifth icon turned to gray. She had one Pokémon left. Her ace. Her monster. The land shark god, Garchomp. Ash looked at his Lucario. It stood panting, the blue aura around it fading slightly. The effort had cost them both. He could feel a dull throb behind his own eyes, a pleasant exhaustion that came from a massive expenditure of energy. He gave his Pokémon a proud smile, a connection that needed no words, and recalled it. 5 down, he murmured to himself, his voice steady. 1 to go. Cynthia stood motionless for a full 10 seconds. She wasn't looking at the scoreboard. She wasn't looking at the crowd. She was looking at Ash, and her expression was one he had never seen on anyone, let alone her. It was a mixture of profound shock, intellectual fascination, and something else, something that looked almost like reverence. The way a scholar of ancient history might look upon seeing a living, breathing god. She finally reached for her last Pokeball. Her hand was perfectly steady, but her eyes held the storm. Ash Ketchum. She said, and this time, her voice was different. Quieter. More personal. The stadium mics barely picked it up. You have done more than simply battle me. You have shown me something new. I'm not done yet, Ash said, his confidence not arrogant, but absolute. His hand went to his belt, to the one Pokémon he hadn't used yet. The one he had saved for this. No, Cynthia agreed, a strange, small smile touching her lips. It was a breathtaking sight, like seeing a statue come to life. I don't believe you are. She threw the ball. The roar that greeted Garchomp's appearance was primal. The Pokémon was a weapon of nature, a synthesis of dragon and shark made manifest. It was larger than the broadcasts did it justice, its hide a deep, menacing blue, the yellow star on its snout a stark warning. The scythe-like claws on its arms gleamed under the stadium lights. It threw its head back and unleashed a cry that shook the very foundations of the stadium, a sound of pure, unadulterated power. This was it. The final boss. The immovable object. Ash took a deep breath. He could feel the raw, intimidating pressure radiating from Garchomp, a promise of overwhelming physical force. He looked over at Pikachu, who was watching from the sidelines, his little body tense, ears twitching. They shared a look. It wasn't time for Pikachu yet. Not for this. He took his final Pokeball from his belt. I need you, buddy. Let's show them what we can do, he shouted, and threw it. The Pokémon that emerged was sleek, blue, and wrapped in a tongue scarf. Greninja. It landed without a sound, a ninja in the heart of a hurricane, its sharp, red eyes immediately sizing up the draconic behemoth before it. And Ash's final Pokémon is Greninja, the announcer bellowed. A Pokémon we haven't seen him use in years. The hero of the Kalos crisis has returned to the world stage. Cynthia's eyes narrowed. I've studied the records from the Lumiose conference. The battle bond phenomenon. So, it's true. It's more than that, Ash said, planting his feet. He felt the connection snap into place, a familiar and exhilarating rush. It was like opening a floodgate in his own soul. It's a promise. Let's go. As he yelled, the world seemed to warp around his Pokémon. A swirling vortex of water erupted from the ground, enveloping Greninja in a torrential cocoon. The crowd gasped, many of them seeing this transformation for the first time in person. The water spun faster and faster, and then, with an explosive burst, it reshaped itself. When the spray cleared, Greninja was changed. It was taller, sleeker. The features on its face were sharper, more aligned with Ash's own determined expression. And on its back, a giant, four-pointed shuriken made of pure, concentrated water had formed, glowing with a faint, inner light. Ash Greninja. Ash felt a surge of power, his senses merging with Greninja's. He could feel the ground beneath Greninja's feet, could feel the wind from Garchomp's breathing on its skin. His heart rate synchronized with the furious tempo of the battle to come. Garchomp, Dragon Rush. Cynthia commanded, her voice like cracking ice. Garchomp roared and became a speeding comet of draconic energy, wreathed in a phantom blue dragon. It charged across the field, tearing up the turf in its wake, an unstoppable force of nature. Left. Ash thought, and Greninja moved, a blue blur that was barely a suggestion of motion. It sidestepped the cataclysmic charge at the last possible second, the wind from Garchomp's passage whipping its scarf. Now. Aerial Ace. Greninja's legs glowed, and it launched itself off the ground, becoming a series of afterimages as it bounced off the air itself, striking Garchomp from a dozen different angles in the space of a heartbeat. The blows were like a master drummer's solo, precise and powerful, hammering against the dragon's thick hide. Garchomp roared in fury and pain, shaking its massive head. It was fast, but Ash Greninja was faster. It was operating on a level that defied normal Pokémon physics. Don't give it a moment to breathe. Cut. Ash yelled, the command a formality. He was already projecting the intent. Greninja formed a kunai of solidified water in each hand and lunged, a whirlwind of flashing blades. It met Garchomp's own scythe-like claws in a shower of sparks. Dragon Claw versus Cut. It was a dance of death under the stadium lights, the lithe, fluid grace of the ninja against the brutal, overwhelming power of the dragon. Cynthia was watching, her face unreadable. She wasn't just commanding anymore, she was observing, analyzing, trying to comprehend the seamless synergy before her. Ash wasn't just giving orders. He was a part of the battle, his will made manifest in the form of the water ninja. He was a conductor, and Greninja was his orchestra. Enough of this. Garchomp, use your full power. Draco Meteor. This was her ultimate move. Garchomp disengaged, leaped back, and roared at the heavens. Its maw glowed with an apocalyptic orange light, and it fired a massive orb of energy high into the artificial sky of the stadium. At its apex, the orb shattered, becoming a rain of smaller, devastating meteorites, each one a potential knockout blow. The entire field was a kill zone. There was no escape. Don't escape, Ash thought, his focus narrowing to a single point of absolute clarity. Go through it. Water Shuriken, he roared. Greninja leaped into the air, straight towards the descending apocalypse. It pulled the giant shuriken from its back, the massive weapon spinning with a high-pitched whine. It wasn't just water. Ash could feel his own aura flowing into it, turning it from a simple projectile into a shield of pure, focused will. What happened next silenced the stadium. Greninja didn't just throw the shuriken. It met the Draco Meteor head-on. It used the spinning shuriken as a shield, deflecting the first few meteorites with deafening explosions. Then, with a cry that echoed Ash's own, it began to cut. It moved through the storm of falling stars, a blue and black dervish, its giant shuriken slicing through the draconic energy like a hot knife through butter. Each impact sent a shockwave of steam and light across the field. It was impossible. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. Greninja burst through the last of the meteor shower, landing directly in front of the stunned Garchomp. It was panting, steaming, the giant shuriken on its back now smaller, depleted. The effort had been monumental. But it was standing. Cynthia stared, her lips slightly parted. The cool, analytical champion was gone, replaced by a woman witnessing a miracle. Now, Pikachu. Ash's voice was quiet, but it cut through the lingering silence. The little yellow mouse had been waiting. This was his moment. With a determined Pika, he shot onto the field like a bolt of lightning, his cheeks already crackling. Greninja gave him a nod, a passing of the torch, and limped to the sideline, its transformation receding. It had done its part. It had weathered the storm. Now, it was time for the thunder. Garchomp was wounded. It was breathing heavily, its body littered with cuts and burns from Greninja's assault. But it was far from beaten. Its eyes, filled with draconic fury, locked onto the tiny yellow creature that now stood before it. The insult was palpable. So, it comes to this, Cynthia whispered, her voice filled with a strange, breathless wonder. The beginning and the end. Garchomp, this is everything. Dragon Rush. Garchomp roared its defiance and charged one last time, wreathed in the same phantom dragon it had used before. It was slower, but no less deadly. A wounded beast is the most dangerous. Pikachu stood his ground, a tiny beacon of defiance against the charging mountain. Ash closed his eyes. He didn't need to see. He just needed to feel. It's all been for this, buddy. All the miles. All the battles. Everything. Let's show them the full strength of our bond. He felt Pikachu's agreement, a surge of fierce, unwavering loyalty. A lifetime of friendship, of shared struggle and triumph, focused into a single, incandescent point. Pikachu. Volt Tackle. The command was spoken, but the true power came from the silent, perfect union of their spirits. Ash pushed his aura forward, not just into Pikachu, but through him. Pikachu's body exploded with electricity, but this was not the yellow lightning the world knew. It was a torrent of blue-gold energy, a celestial fire. The electricity was so intense it seemed to have physical weight, cracking the ground around him. His entire body was a star. He shot forward. Pikachu, the comet of aura, met Garchomp, the comet of Dragon Force, in the center of the field. The impact was not a sound. It was an event. A wave of pure, colorless energy erupted from the point of contact, a silent shockwave that made the stadium's force field scream and ripple. The light was blinding, a miniature sun detonating in the heart of Winden. For a moment, all sound, all color, all thought, was erased, consumed by the sheer, raw power of the collision. The energy of a perfect bond against the fury of a pseudo-legendary. The will of a boy who refused to lose against the power of a champion who had never known defeat. Then, as quickly as it came, the light vanished. Smoke, thick and heavy, blanketed the entire field. The stadium was utterly, completely silent. 100,000 people held their breath. The global broadcast, watched by billions, showed only a screen of white static from the energy surge. Slowly, the smoke began to clear. A massive shape lay on the ground, carved into a shallow crater. Garchomp. It was unconscious, its formidable power finally extinguished. A few feet away, a tiny figure stood, swaying. Pikachu. His body was scorched, his breathing was ragged, and sparks sputtered weakly from his cheeks. But he was on his feet. He turned his head, looked towards Ash, and gave a weak, triumphant Pika-Pi. The stadium remained silent for one heartbeat. 2. 3. The referee, his face a mask of utter disbelief, slowly raised his arm. His voice, hoarse with shock, croaked into his microphone. Garchomp is unable to battle. Which means the victory goes to the challenger, Ash Ketchum. The dam of silence broke. The sound that erupted was not a cheer. It was a physical force, a sonic boom of human emotion that seemed to lift the roof off the stadium. It was the sound of history being rewritten in real time. Ash didn't pump his fist. He didn't shout in victory. He simply walked onto the field, his step steady, his eyes fixed on his partner. The roar of the crowd, the flashing lights, the gravity of what he had just accomplished, it was all secondary. He knelt down, his movements unhurried, and gently scooped the exhausted Pikachu into his arms. "You did it, buddy," he whispered, cradling the small Pokémon to his chest. "You did it. I'm so proud of you." Pikachu nuzzled against him, his energy spent, but his spirit soaring. Ash stood there in the center of the ruined battlefield, a quiet king in the eye of his own hurricane, holding the symbol of his victory. That's when he looked up and saw her. Cynthia was walking towards him. Her stride was measured, but there was an unsteadiness to it he hadn't seen before. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with an emotion that transcended shock. It was awe. Profound, earth-shattering, paradigm-shifting awe. She looked at him not as a defeated opponent looks at a victor, but as one might look at the sunrise for the very first time. She saw not the boy, not the trainer, but the source of the impossible light she had just witnessed. Reporters and camera crews, breaking protocol, began to swarm the field. One of them, a frantic young woman with a microphone, managed to get to Cynthia first. "Champion. Champion Cynthia. What are your thoughts? You've been defeated. For the first time ever, your reign is over. What can you possibly say at a moment like this?" Cynthia didn't even look at the reporter. Her eyes remained locked on Ash. She reached out, her hand trembling slightly, and took the microphone. Her grip was firm, decisive. She walked the final few steps until she was standing directly in front of Ash, so close he could see the flecks of gold in her gray eyes. The crowd's roar softened, sensing a moment of great import. The world leaned in. Her voice, when she spoke into the microphone, was not the voice of a defeated champion. It was trembling, yes, but with revelation, not sadness. It was clear, resonant, and it carried across the silent stadium and to the billions watching across the planet. "By the ancient laws of Sin-No," she began, her words ringing with the weight of forgotten ages, forged when God still walked the earth and the lines between humanity and legend were blurred. When power was the sole determinant of leadership, a covenant was made to ensure the strength of our world. She took a deep, shuddering breath. Ash could only stare, Pikachu stirring weakly in his arms. What was she doing? I, the defeated champion, she declared, her voice rising in strength and conviction, in the face of a power that transcends all known understanding, a power that speaks to the very soul of the world. I invoke the vow of unity. The reporter's jaw dropped. Lance, watching from a VIP box, shot to his feet. In homes and public squares around the world, people exchanged confused glances. Cynthia's eyes were shining now, a feverish light within them. I recognize you, Ash Ketchum, she said, her voice dropping to a near-personal tone, though the microphone carried it to every corner of the globe. Not only as my successor as the strongest trainer in the world. She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle, a moment of silence stretched into an eternity. But as my partner. My husband. For 1 second, the world ended. There was no sound. No movement. Just the unblinking red lights of a billion cameras and the frozen, uncomprehending stare of a boy from Pallet Town. Then, chaos. The roar that followed was one of pure, undiluted pandemonium. It was a sound of confusion, outrage, disbelief, and 1,000 other emotions colliding at once. The reporters surged forward, a human tidal wave. League officials screamed into their headsets. The broadcast signal, overloaded with panicked commands, finally cut to a standby pattern, a placid blue screen that did nothing to quell the burgeoning global crisis. But Ash saw none of it. He was trapped in the eye of the storm, his world narrowed to the woman standing before him, her declaration hanging in the air like a guillotine. He was the new world champion. And, apparently, he was a husband. Deep in a realm outside of time and space, the very fabric of reality buckled. The distortion world, a chaotic landscape of floating islands, sideways waterfalls, and physics-defying structures. Shuddered. Giratina, the dimension's soul, eternal resident, lifted its massive head. The renegade Pokemon, a being of immense power, felt the shockwave not as a sound or a tremor, but as a discordant note in the symphony of existence. It was an impossible surge of pure aura, a torrent of life force so immense it had bled through the veil of dimensions. It had originated from the human world, from the battle. The entity turned its golden-ringed head towards the deepest, most stable part of its domain. Here, suspended in an eternal, silent stasis, was a massive, crystalline formation. It was a prison, forged in the dawn of time, a perfect, multifaceted cage of crystallized temporal and spatial energy. A single, hairline crack appeared on its surface. From the fissure, a wisp of something seeped out. It wasn't light or dark. It wasn't matter or energy. It was a void. A patch of absolute silence. An anti-existence that seemed to drink the very reality around it. Giratina, the lord of its own dimension, a Pokemon that feared nothing, opened its maw. And it shrieked. It was not a roar of anger or a challenge. It was a sound of pure, primal, instinctual fear. The warden had just felt the stirring of its prisoner. And it knew, with a certainty that chilled its ghostly core, that the lock had just been broken. Chapter 2, The Eye of the Storm. The world dissolved into a smear of light and a roar that had no end. Hands grabbed at Ash's arms, his jacket. Microphones were shoved towards his face like weapons. The frantic, unintelligible questions of the reporters were a physical barrage. He instinctively tightened his hold on Pikachu, shielding his exhausted partner from the pandemonium. His mind, still buzzing from the colossal output of aura, struggled to process the two contradictory realities that had just slammed into him. He was the champion, and he was a husband. One was a lifelong dream. The other was an absolute unknown. Through the chaos, he saw her. Cynthia was being similarly swarmed, but a cordon of men in sharp, dark suits was already forming around her, their faces grim and professional. They moved with an efficiency that screamed League elite security. One of them, a tall man with a severe haircut and an earpiece, met Ash's eyes across the churning sea of bodies. He gave a sharp, almost imperceptible nod. A second team was already moving towards him. "Mr. Ketchum. This way, now," a voice barked in his ear. He didn't have a choice. A firm hand clamped onto his bicep, and he was pulled, half-guided, half-shoved, through the frantic crowd. They moved with brutal purpose, creating a wake in the human tide. Flashes strobed in his eyes, turning the scene into a series of disjointed, blinding snapshots: the shocked face of a reporter, the gaping mouth of a fan, the shimmering turf of the battlefield he had just conquered. He was being extracted. A problem being contained. They bypassed the standard locker rooms and hallways, instead descending a stark, concrete ramp into the stadium's underbelly. The roar of the crowd faded, replaced by the hum of industrial ventilation and the rhythmic slap of their polished shoes on the floor. A black, unmarked van was waiting, its side door sliding open before they even reached it. Inside, the lead agent commanded. Ash ducked into the vehicle, the door sliding shut behind him with a heavy, final thud. The world went silent. The interior was Spartan, all dark leather and tinted windows. He was alone, save for the two agents in the front seats, separated from him by a thick pane of glass. The van accelerated smoothly, moving through a private tunnel system beneath Winden. He finally let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The adrenaline from the battle was beginning to ebb, leaving behind a profound exhaustion and a dizzying sense of surreality. He looked down at Pikachu, who was stirring in his arms. The little mouse's fur was still singed in places, but his breathing was steady. "You okay, buddy?" Ash whispered, gently stroking his head. "Pika." Pikachu murmured, a tired but reassuring sound. He nuzzled into Ash's chest, seeking comfort. For a moment, that was all that mattered. The bond between them was his anchor in this swirling vortex of insanity. The world could turn upside down, but this was real. The van drove for what felt like 10 minutes before gliding to a stop in a secure, subterranean garage. The doors opened into a private elevator. No words were exchanged. Ash followed the agents, his mind a whirlwind of questions. They ascended, and the doors opened directly into a sprawling suite. It was the definition of sterile luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed a breathtaking, rain-slicked panorama of the Winden cityscape at night, but the glass was thick, soundproof. The furniture was modern, minimalist, and uncomfortable looking. A massive television screen, currently dark, dominated one wall. It felt less like a hotel room and more like a beautifully appointed prison cell. "Refreshments are in the kitchenette," one of the agents said, his voice flat. "Do not attempt to leave the suite. A representative of the G8 will be in contact shortly." With that, they stepped back into the elevator, the doors closing and leaving Ash in complete silence. He stood there for a long moment, just listening to the faint hum of the air circulation. He walked over to the window, placing a hand on the cool glass. The city lights glittered below, a world away. He had just achieved the pinnacle of his life's ambition in that city, and now he was a prisoner in a gilded cage above it. He found a small medical kit in one of the bathrooms and carefully tended to Pikachu's minor burns, applying a soothing salve with practiced hands. He then found some Pokémon food, a high-grade blend, and set a bowl out. Pikachu ate weakly, his energy still depleted. "We'll figure this out, buddy," Ash said, more to himself than to his partner. "We always do." He found the remote and switched on the television. The blue standby screen vanished, and the chaos he had just escaped flooded the room. Every single channel was covering the story. "Utter pandemonium here at Winden Stadium," a panicked Kanto News anchor was saying, live from outside the locked-down venue. "We are being told that both Ash Ketchum and former champion Cynthia have been moved to a secure, undisclosed location." He flipped the channel. A Colossian news network was showing a panel of experts. A woman with avant-garde glasses and a severe haircut, identified as a cultural analyst, was speaking animatedly. This is not a proposal. This is a declaration. Cynthia is a student of history. The vow of unity she invoked is a semi-mythological pact from Sinnoh's heroic age. It predates the Pokemon League itself. It binds the strength of the old champion to the new to face a great threat. For her to invoke it, it's a political and romantic statement of breathtaking audacity. He flipped again. A Unovan talk show. The host was leaning forward, a salacious grin on his face. So, the question on everyone's mind, what's their ship name? Sindash? Ashthea? The tabloids are going to have a field day. The Ice Queen of Sinnoh and the Eternal Kid from Pallet Town. You can't write this stuff. He switched it off, a headache beginning to throb behind his eyes. He wasn't a piece of gossip. This wasn't a story. This was his life. A small icon on the screen caught his eye. A message notification. He clicked it, and a video call window popped up. Dawn's face, etched with worry, filled the screen. Brock was beside her, his usual calm demeanor strained. Ash. Are you okay? Dawn asked, her voice tight with concern. We've been trying to call your Poketch for the last half hour. They're saying you're in protective custody. I'm fine, Ash said, managing a small smile. It was good to see them. They were another anchor. It's a lot. I'm still trying to process it. Process it? Ash, Cynthia just declared you her husband on live television. Brock said, rubbing his temples. As a student of these things, I can tell you, that's a move of unprecedented boldness. But what does it even mean? Is it legally binding? I don't know any more than you do, Ash admitted, his voice quiet. I haven't even spoken to her since it happened. Before they could say more, the sound of the elevator arriving made him turn. The doors slid open. Cynthia stepped into the room. She was alone. She had changed out of her battle attire and was now wearing a simple but elegant black turtleneck and gray trousers. Her hair was down, cascading over her shoulders. The formidable champion's aura was gone, replaced by an air of profound weariness and quiet intensity. She looked at him, then at the screen where Dawn and Brock were staring, wide-eyed. I'll call you guys back, Ash said quickly, ending the call before they could protest. The silence that descended was heavier than anything in the stadium. It was just the two of them. The two most talked about people on the planet, standing in a silent room, the weight of 1 billion questions pressing down on them. She walked over to the minibar, her movements fluid and controlled, and poured a glass of water. Her hand was perfectly steady. He watched her, waiting. He wasn't going to yell. He wasn't going to panic. He just needed to understand. She took a slow sip, her back still to him. I imagine you have questions, she said, her voice a low murmur. One, Ash replied, his tone even. Why? She turned to face him, leaning back against the counter. Her gray eyes met his, and he saw a maelstrom of emotions swirling within them, exhaustion, apprehension, but also a startling, unwavering conviction. Because I had to, she said simply. Because in the final moment of our battle, when your Pikachu's attack met my Garchomp's, I saw something. Not with my eyes, but, here. She tapped her temple. I'm a historian, Ash. I've spent my life studying the myths of Sinnoh, the stories of the creation trio, of Arceus, of the first Aura Guardians. I always treated them as just that, myths. Metaphors for power. She took another sip of water, her gaze distant, as if she were reliving the moment. But what I felt from you, from your bond with your Pokemon, it wasn't a metaphor. It was a source. A primordial light. It was the raw, untamed life force the old texts describe. The kind of power that shapes the world. The kind of power that attracts things. Ash remained silent, letting her speak. He had long known his aura was special, but he had never considered it on this scale. To him, it was just connection. Friendship made tangible. The vow of unity isn't a romantic tradition, she continued, her voice gaining a harder, more academic edge. It was a crisis protocol. In the ancient world, when a warrior appeared whose power dwarfed all others, they were seen as both a blessing and a threat. A beacon. And beacons attract moths, but they also attract predators. The vow was created to bind the established power of the region, the champion, to the new, world-altering power. To guide it, to protect it, and to stand with it against the darkness it would inevitably draw. She looked at him directly, her scholarly tone softening into something more personal, more vulnerable. I didn't think. I reacted. It was an instinct I couldn't control. My rational mind was screaming, but a deeper part of me, the part that has spent a decade communing with Sinoa's oldest secrets, recognized your power and executed a protocol that has lain dormant for 1,000 years. I was overwhelmed. He finally understood. It wasn't an impulse. It wasn't an emotional outburst. It was the logical, albeit shocking, conclusion of a lifetime of research colliding with an impossible reality. He was the living myth she had only ever read about. He walked towards her, stopping a few feet away. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even shocked anymore. He was processing. He was a trainer. And this was the most complex strategic problem he had ever faced. So, he said, his voice calm and decisive, cutting through the dense fog of mythology and protocol. You saw a potential catastrophe coming, and you reacted in the only way you knew how to prepare for it. By tying the two strongest trainers in the world together. She blinked, surprised by his clarity, by his lack of panic. In essence, yes. Okay, he said, nodding slowly. So the real question isn't about the vow, or marriage, or what the news is saying. The real question is, what is the catastrophe? What is this darkness you're talking about? Before she could answer, the television switched on by itself. The face of a stern, grim-looking man appeared. He had sharp, angular features and fiery red hair. It was Lance, champion of the Indigo League and head of the Pokemon G8. His expression was thunderous. Ash. Cynthia, his voice boomed, cold and authoritative. I trust you are comfortable. You have, in the span of 30 minutes, destabilized the political structure of the global Pokemon League, incited mass public confusion, and made a mockery of the World Coronation Series. Lance, you don't understand, Cynthia began, but he cut her off with a sharp gesture. I understand that you, Cynthia, have acted with unbelievable recklessness, invoking a forgotten superstition and undermining the very authority of this institution. And you, Ash, he said, his dragon-like eyes pinning Ash to the spot, have just won the single greatest title in the world, and your first act is to involve yourself in this circus. It wasn't my act, Ash stated plainly, his voice betraying no fear. I was standing there when it happened. Just like you. Lance's eyes narrowed. He was not used to being spoken to with such directness, especially by someone so young. Your complicity is irrelevant. The G8 has held an emergency session. Your victory, Ash, is legitimate and will be recorded. The title of World Monarch is yours. However, this union is not recognized by any official body. It is a private matter, and a public relations nightmare. It's more than that, Lance, Cynthia insisted. It's a matter of regional security, based on historical precedent. History does not govern us, Cynthia. The League Charter does, Lance retorted coldly. And the Charter has no provision for battlefield engagements resulting in matrimony. You have created a crisis, and you will both answer for it. A private transport will be dispatched for you at 0800 hours tomorrow. You are being summoned to an extraordinary session of the Champions Council at the Indigo Plateau. You will explain yourselves, and you will submit to the Council's judgment. Until then, you are to remain where you are and make no public statements. Am I understood? Ash and Cynthia exchanged a look. They were in this together now, whether they liked it or not. Understood, Ash said, speaking for both of them. The screen went blank. The silence that returned was heavier than before. They weren't just in a gilded cage anymore. They were defendants, summoned to their own trial. The Indigo Plateau, Cynthia murmured, a wry, humorless smile on her lips. Lance is going to try to tear us apart, politically and publicly. He sees your power as a rogue element, and me as an accomplice who has given it legitimacy outside of his control. Let him try, Ash said, his voice quiet but firm. He turned to face the window again, looking out at the city lights. He felt Pikachu climb onto his shoulder, a familiar, comforting weight. You said my power would attract predators. It looks like the first one is already at the door. Miles away, where the dark, churning sea of the northern coast met the rugged cliffs of Sinnoh, the lights of Canalave Library cast a warm, inviting glow against the encroaching night. But further up the coast, on a remote, windswept peninsula, another light was going out. The Ether Foundation Sinnoh Annex, Outpost Epsilon, was a state-of-the-art research facility dedicated to studying atmospheric and extradimensional energy phenomena. It was staffed by a dozen of the brightest minds from the region, a small, self-sufficient community of scientists and their Pokémon partners. At 21:17 local time, Dr. Eris Thorne was supposed to send his nightly status report. He was sitting at his terminal, a half-eaten cup of ramen beside him, his fingers poised over the keyboard. His partner, a clever Porygon Z, was hovering beside his chair, projecting diagnostic data onto a nearby wall. He was typing a sentence, unusual low-level energy fluctuations detected at 2109, seemingly centered on a localized EM, his fingers stopped. His Porygon Z glitched, its frantic, erratic movements ceasing instantly. It hung in the air, a frozen statue of digital code. Dr. Thorne remained staring at the screen, his eyes wide, but vacant. The half-typed sentence remained, a digital ghost. Throughout the outpost, the same thing was happening. A technician in the communications hub, listening to a pop song on her headphones, froze mid-nod. Her Whimsicott, asleep on a pillow in the corner, simply stopped. Its chest no longer rose and fell. In the common area, a game of chess was halted, a knight captured mid-air by a trainer's hand that would never complete its move. Outside, a flock of starly perched on the communications tower went rigid, their chirping cut off as if by a switch. They remained on the wire, perfect, feathered statues against the gray sky. There was no sound. No scream. No struggle. Just a sudden, absolute, and total cessation. In a monitoring station in Jubilife City, a junior technician named Kenji was finishing his shift. He was mostly watching for seismic activity or unusual weather patterns. An alarm, a soft, unobtrusive chime, drew his attention to a secondary screen. It monitored biological energy signatures from key facilities. He frowned. The reading from Outpost Epsilon had just flatlined. Not dropped. Not fluctuated. It had gone from a healthy, vibrant green line indicating a dozen humans and nearly 30 Pokémon, to absolute zero. A vertical drop. Weird, he muttered, tapping a command. Run diagnostics on sensor array Epsilon 7. The system replied instantly, sensors operational. All readings nominal. He tried hailing them. Jubilife monitoring to Outpost Epsilon, please respond. Static. He tried the emergency frequency. More static. He checked the outpost's internal systems. Power was on. Climate control was stable. Life support was green across the board. But the biomonitors, both primary and backup, showed nothing. It was a technological impossibility. A ghost station. He flagged it, typing up a report. Total loss of contact and biological energy signature at Outpost Epsilon. Recommend immediate investigation. Possible catastrophic equipment malfunction affecting biosensors, though unlikely. He was about to send it when another reading caught his eye. It was from a secondary, more sensitive sensor, one designed to measure ambient life force in the surrounding environment. The area around Outpost Epsilon, a circle roughly a kilometer in diameter, was also at zero. A perfect circle of nothing. And the data from the last 60 seconds showed its edge. The circle was growing. Slowly. Imperceptibly. A tide of silence, creeping outward at a meter a minute. A shiver, cold and profound, ran down Kenji's spine. This wasn't an equipment malfunction. This was something else. Something terrifyingly new. Back in the suite in Winden, Ash and Cynthia stood in silence, the glow of the city lights painting their faces. The immediate chaos had passed. Now, they were in the calm at the center of the hurricane, the eye of the storm. The future was a terrifying blank, a map with no roads. "They'll want to separate us," Cynthia said, her voice barely a whisper. "Divide and conquer. It's what Lance would do." "They can try," Ash replied, turning from the window to face her. His expression was calm, resolute. The fear and confusion had been burned away, replaced by the familiar, sharp focus he felt before a critical battle. "You made this vow to face a great threat. You think it's some ancient monster or a shadow from a myth. But maybe the threat is already here. Maybe it's people like Lance, who fear power they can't control." Cynthia looked at him, truly looked at him, for the first time without the lens of challenger or phenomenon. She saw the young man, burdened with a power he didn't ask for and a crown he had just won, already looking for the path forward, already framing the conflict. He wasn't a reckless boy. He was a natural leader, forged in 1,000 trials. Her instinct, her shocking, world-shaking instinct in the stadium, had been right. Perhaps, she conceded. A sliver of her old, confident smile returned. "But it seems, for now, our first opponent is the Pokémon League itself. We have a long night ahead of us. We need a strategy." Ash nodded. "Okay. You're the expert in history and politics. I'm the one they're afraid of." A grin, his first genuine one since the battle ended, touched his lips. It was a flash of the old, adventurous Ash she'd heard about. This should be fun. It was a strange beginning. Not of a marriage, not yet. But of an alliance. Two champions, one of title and one of power, standing together against a world that was about to try its best to tear them down. Chapter 3, The Council of Thrones. The journey to the Indigo Plateau was a study in gilded captivity. The transport was a sleek, unmarked jet with an interior that made the Winden suite look rustic. The windows were polarized to an opaque black, and their only companions were two silent League agents who stood at either end of the cabin like stoic statues. Ash and Cynthia were seated across from each other at a polished mahogany table, the low hum of the engines the only sound. Pikachu sat on the table between them, nibbling on a puffin Cynthia had produced from a small case. It was a peace offering, and a surprisingly good one. Ash watched her, a strange feeling settling in his chest. In the frantic, sleepless hours of the night, they had talked. Not about feelings, or the future, or the impossible situation they were in. They talked strategy. Cynthia, the brilliant tactician, had laid out the political landscape of the G8. Lance, the traditionalist autocrat. Stephen Stone, the pragmatic industrialist, more interested in geology and progress than dusty tradition. Diantha, the artist, concerned with public image and the spirit of battling. They had formed a plan. It was flimsy, based on assumptions, but it was a plan. Ash, for his part, had listened, absorbed, and found his own role. He wasn't a politician. He couldn't debate policy or precedent. But he had a presence. A power that, as Cynthia had pointed out, made people uneasy. He wouldn't be the shield. He would be the sword, held in reserve. His part was to be himself, and let them wonder what he was capable of. They'll try to corner you on the vow's legitimacy, Ash said, breaking the silence. Lance will call it superstition. And he'll be right, by modern legal standards, Cynthia replied, not looking up from the datapad she was studying. It displayed ancient Sinno texts, her finger tracing the faded script. But I won't be arguing law. I'll be arguing from a position of historical necessity. I will present my actions not as an emotional whim, but as a duty I was compelled to perform as a scholar and a guardian of my region's heritage. You're going to use your reputation as a weapon, Ash surmised. A small, sharp smile touched her lips. My reputation is all I have left at the moment. I might as well. The jet banked, and a moment later, the engines whined as the landing gear deployed. A soft chime echoed through the cabin. We are approaching the Indigo Plateau, a disembodied voice announced. Please prepare for arrival. Ash looked out the window. The polarization was fading, revealing a stunning view. The Indigo Plateau wasn't just a stadium. It was a sprawling complex, a fortress of tradition carved into the peak of a mountain, the heart of the Pokémon League's power in Kanto and Johto. It was a place of pilgrimage for trainers, a symbol of the ultimate goal. Today, for him, it felt like the lion's den. The jet didn't land at the public airfield. It touched down on a private, heavily guarded strip behind the main stadium, a place reserved for champions and the highest-ranking officials. The moment the ramp lowered, the air changed. It was cooler here, thinner, and charged with an unspoken authority. Lance was waiting for them at the bottom of the ramp. He wasn't alone. He was flanked by 4 Elite Four members, their faces grim and unwelcoming. Bruno, Agatha, Lorelei, and Koga. They were a wall of silent judgment. Lance was not wearing his familiar cape. He was dressed in a sharp, military-style tunic, adorned with medals Ash didn't recognize. It was his commander-in-chief attire. This was not a conversation. It was an inquest. Cynthia. Ash, Lance greeted them, his voice as cold as the mountain air. Welcome to the Indigo Plateau. You will come with me. It wasn't a request. He turned and walked away, expecting them to follow. They did, flanked by the silent guards of the Elite Four. They walked through corridors of polished stone, past tapestries depicting legendary battles and statues of past champions. It was a hall of history, and today, Ash felt like he was being marched to his own inquisition. They entered a large, circular chamber. It was dark, dominated by a massive, round table of black obsidian. 8 high-backed chairs, like thrones, were spaced around it. 4 were occupied. Stephen Stone was there in person, his silver hair catching the dim light. He gave them a cool, analytical nod, his fingers steepled before him. Diantha of Kalos and Leon of Galar were present as holograms, their shimmering blue forms looking down from their designated seats. The other 3 chairs were empty. Lance took his seat at the head of the table, the chair slightly more ornate than the others. There were no seats for Ash or Cynthia. They were left to stand in the center of the room, like defendants in a courtroom. This extraordinary session of the Champions' Council is now convened, Lance announced, his voice echoing in the stone chamber. The matter at hand, the unprecedented and destabilizing actions of Champion Cynthia of Sinnoh, and the complicity of the newly crowned world monarch, Ash Ketchum. He let the accusation hang in the air. Cynthia. You will begin. Explain this. Vow of unity. And know that, historical precedent from a tome of myths will not suffice as a defense for plunging the League into chaos. Cynthia stepped forward, her composure absolute. She was no longer Ash's co-conspirator from the jet. She was the champion of Sinnoh, and she commanded the floor with an effortless authority that even Lance could not diminish. I will not offer a defense, Lance, for I do not believe my actions require one, she began, her voice calm and clear. I acted in accordance with a protocol that predates this league, a protocol designed for a specific and dire circumstance, the emergence of a power so profound it could alter the balance of the world. She turned her gaze to the other champions. Diantha, you witnessed the battle. Stephen, I know your teams have analyzed the energy readings. The power Ash Ketchum displayed was not simply a strong bond. It was an exponential surge of aura, a life force phenomenon on a scale not recorded in modern history. My research, which I have submitted to this council, indicates that such events do not occur in a vacuum. They are heralds. They are warnings. Stephen Stone leaned forward, his holographic form flickering slightly. Fascinating theory, Cynthia. But you've made an extraordinary leap from powerful trainer to harbinger of doom. You must admit, the action you took, a public declaration of marriage, seems excessive. Was it? Cynthia countered, her gaze sharp. Or was it the only tool available to me, passed down through Sinoa's history, to formally bind my strength and the political weight of my region to this new power? To ensure it is not isolated, not feared, but integrated and prepared for what is to come. The vow is not about marriage in the modern sense. It is about alliance. A total, unbreakable alliance. An alliance you formed without the consent of this council. Lance snapped, his fist hitting the obsidian table with a sharp crack. You have created an independent power block outside the G8's authority. It is a direct challenge to the stability of the League. It is a direct response to a threat you refuse to see. Cynthia shot back, her voice rising with passion for the first time. The debate raged. It was a battle of wills, of ideology. Lance argued for order, for the established structure. Cynthia argued for adaptation, for acknowledging a new reality. Diantha worried about the public perception, the romantic narrative, that was spinning out of their control. Stephen remained pragmatic, intrigued by the aura phenomenon and its potential scientific implications, but wary of the political fallout. Ash remained silent. He watched, he listened. He was the subject of the entire debate, yet he was an outsider to it. They were talking about his power, his future, as if he were a natural disaster to be managed. He felt Pikachu tense on his shoulder, a low growl rumbling in the little Pokemon's chest. Not yet, buddy, Ash thought, placing a calming hand on his back. Let them show their hand. During a tense pause in the argument, a new voice, smooth and confident, spoke from the chamber's entrance. Perhaps I might offer a third perspective. All heads turned. Standing in the arched doorway was a young man Ash recognized from the news reports, and from the brief, unnerving encounter at the stadium. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a sharp white suit, his silver hair perfectly coiffed. His smile was charismatic, but his eyes were cold and calculating. It was Lysander. Lysander, Lance said, his tone softening slightly. This is a closed session. My apologies, champion, Lysander said with a slight, respectful bow. But the matter you are discussing affects the entire world. And I believe I represent a significant portion of the global community who feel concerned. He walked into the chamber, his presence commanding. He did not look at Ash or Cynthia. He addressed the council directly. For weeks, the world has watched Ash Ketchum's meteoric rise. We have seen his passion, his unorthodox strategies. But in his final battle, we saw something else. Something chaotic. He turned his gaze on Ash, and it was like being weighed and found wanting. This aura you speak of, champion Cynthia, he said, his voice dripping with condescending reason, is not a holy light. It is raw, untamed emotion given physical form. It is the power of rage, of desperation, of reckless abandon. The very forces that lead to destruction. Is this truly a power we wish to elevate? To legitimize? He gestured around the chamber. This league was founded on principles of control, strategy, and the respectful bond between trainer and Pokemon. What Ash Ketchum represents is the opposite. It is unpredictability. It is chaos. And your vow, he said, finally looking at Cynthia with a pitying expression, was a capitulation to that chaos. An emotional, irrational response to a display of raw, dangerous power. His words were insidious. He was twisting Ash's strength, his bond with his Pokémon, into a flaw. He was painting him as a threat not because of malice, but because of his very nature. And he was making sense to the people in the room who craved order above all else. Ash could see it in the way Lance was nodding. He could see it in the concerned frown on Diantha's face. "What is your solution, then, Lysander?" Stephen Stone asked, his curiosity piqued. "Order," Lysander replied simply. "A new paradigm. One where the bond between trainer and Pokémon is perfected, not through wild emotion, but through flawless logic and control. A world where power is not a chaotic variable, but a predictable constant. I believe that is the future the League should be striving for, not indulging in ancient superstitions and leonizing emotional instability." He had thrown down the gauntlet. He had framed the entire conflict as a choice between two futures, Ash's world of passionate, unpredictable chaos, or his world of cold, predictable order. Ash knew it was his time. He stepped forward, and the room fell silent. He hadn't spoken a word until now, and his sudden movement commanded their attention. He didn't look at the council. He looked directly at Lysander. "You talk a lot," Ash said, his voice quiet, yet it carried more weight than all the shouting that had come before. "You talk about control, and order, and logic. But you haven't said a single thing about trust. Or friendship. Or love." He gestured back toward Cynthia. "You call her vow an emotional response. I call it an act of faith. She felt a power she didn't understand, and instead of trying to destroy it, she chose to stand with it. You see chaos. She saw strength." He finally turned to the council, his eyes sweeping over them, meeting each of their gazes. He was no longer a defendant. He was a monarch, addressing his court. "You're all afraid," he stated, not as an accusation, but as a fact. "You're afraid of what you can't control. You're afraid of a power that doesn't fit in your neat little boxes and rulebooks. You can sit here and debate politics all day. You can argue about what's legal and what's proper. But out there, the world is changing. A power like mine doesn't just emerge. It's a response to something. It's a sign. And while you're in here trying to figure out how to punish me for it, the real threat, the one Cynthia's instincts are screaming about, is growing." His voice didn't rise, but its intensity filled the room. He radiated a confidence so absolute it was unnerving. It was the same presence he'd had on the battlefield. A quiet, undeniable authority. "So here's my proposal," he said, his eyes locking on Lance. "You want to see if I'm a threat? You want to test my power? Fine. Give me a real problem to solve. Not this political squabbling. Give me a crisis. Give me a mission." He glanced at Cynthia. "Give us a mission. Let us prove that this alliance you're so afraid of is exactly what the world needs right now." The challenge hung in the air, audacious and direct. He had completely reframed the debate. He had turned their inquest into a job interview. There was a long, tense silence. Lysander looked furious, his charismatic mask slipping to reveal a flash of raw anger. He had been outmaneuvered, his philosophical argument swept aside by a simple, direct challenge. It was Stephen Stone who broke the silence. He tapped a command on his armrest, and a holographic map appeared over the center of the table. It showed the Sinnoh region. A single red dot was blinking on a remote northern peninsula. "As it happens," Stephen said, his voice thoughtful, "we may have just such a problem. 24 hours ago, we lost all contact with the Ether Foundation's research annex at Outpost Epsilon. Not just contact. All biological energy signatures ceased instantaneously. The area of effect is contained, for now. But it is expanding." He looked from the map to Ash, then to Cynthia. The cause is unknown. The situation is unprecedented. It requires a delicate touch, and a great deal of power. It is a mission for champions. Lance looked from Stephen to Ash, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. Ash had cornered him. To refuse would be to admit fear. To accept would be to legitimize the very partnership he was trying to dissolve. Fine, Lance said through gritted teeth. The council agrees. A temporary truce. Ash, Cynthia, you will investigate the anomaly at Outpost Epsilon. You will operate under a probationary status, reporting directly to this council. Succeed, and we will reconsider the nature of your vow. Fail, he added, his eyes narrowing, and we will take all necessary measures to contain you both. The session was over. Ash had won the first round. As they were being escorted out of the chamber, Lysander fell into step beside them. His charming smile was back, but it didn't reach his eyes. A clever gambit, Ketchum. He said, his voice a low, venomous purr. You've bought yourself some time. But you can't outrun your nature. That chaotic power of yours will be your undoing. And when it is, I will be there to offer the world the order it so desperately needs. He gave a slight nod and peeled off, disappearing down a different corridor. Ash watched him go, a cold feeling settling in his gut. That man wasn't just a rival. He was an enemy. A true enemy, who believed so completely in his own righteousness that he would burn the world down to prove it. In a hidden sanctuary, deep beneath the glittering towers of Lumio City, Lysander strode into a chamber that was the complete antithesis of the Indigo Plateau's hallowed halls. It was stark, white, and silent. In the center of the room, on a pedestal, rested a jagged shard of rock. It was a dull, lusterless black, and it seemed to absorb the light around it, creating a small pocket of shadow in the brightly lit room. He placed his hand on the rock. It was cold, a deep, unnatural cold that seemed to leach the warmth from his very bones. They are blind, he whispered to the stone, his voice filled with a chilling fervor. They cling to their chaotic emotions, to their messy, unpredictable bonds. They would rather entrust the world to a boy who runs on instinct than to a vision of perfect order. He closed his eyes, a look of ecstatic concentration on his face. He is stronger than I anticipated. The aura is more potent. But it is still just a flame. And a flame can be snuffed out. The black rock in his hand pulsed, a faint, barely visible ripple of anti-light, a flicker of pure nothingness. They are sending him to the test site, Lysander continued, a cruel smile spreading across his face. To the first bloom of our new world. Let him see the peace of true silence. Let him face a power that his emotions cannot conquer. The rock pulsed again, stronger this time. Lysander felt a connection snap into place, a psychic link across hundreds of miles. He was reaching out, not to a person, but to a force. To the beautiful, perfect emptiness he had unleashed upon Outpost Epsilon. Show him, my lord, Lysander breathed, his voice trembling with devotion. Show the Aura Prince the meaning of true power. The power of zero. Chapter 4, The Sound of Silence. The flight to Sinnoh was tense. The League-chartered jet was faster and more luxurious than the last, a clear message that this was now an officially sanctioned, high-stakes mission. But the upgrade did little to ease the atmosphere. Ash and Cynthia sat in a heavy silence, the weight of their probationary status pressing down on them. They were no longer just Ash and Cynthia. They were a single entity, a test case for the world. Succeed together, or fail together. Ash stared out the window, watching the sea of clouds give way to the rugged, snow-dusted peaks of the Mount Coronet range. Sinnoh. Her home. A place he'd traveled through as a kid, full of memories of contests, gym battles, and facing down gods. Now, he was returning as something else entirely, to investigate a mystery that had the world's leaders spooked. He glanced at Cynthia. She was poring over the mission briefing on a datapad, her brow furrowed in concentration. The file was thin, mostly filled with technical jargon about the failure of the outpost sensors and a single, chilling satellite image. The image showed a perfectly circular patch of land where the vibrant green of the forest had been replaced by a dull, washed-out gray. It looked like a scar on the world. No heat signature, no energy readings, no signs of life, Cynthia murmured, thinking aloud. It's as if a circle a kilometer wide has been edited out of existence. Lysander called it the peace of true silence, Ash said, the memory of the man's smug, chilling words sending a shiver down his spine. He knew about this. He might have even caused it. His rhetoric about order and control fits the profile, Cynthia agreed, her eyes narrowing. To drain an area of all chaotic life force would be, in his twisted view, a form of purification. An experiment. The jet began its descent, banking towards the rugged northern coastline. The pilot's voice came over the intercom. We are approaching the designated landing zone, 2 kilometers south of the anomaly. We cannot proceed any further. The zone is emitting a field that interferes with all advanced electronics. We will maintain this position and await your signal. Understood, Cynthia replied. The ramp lowered, and a blast of cold, salty air filled the cabin. The landscape was stark and beautiful, windswept cliffs, hardy pine trees clinging to the rock, and the churning, gray-blue sea below. But even from this distance, there was a sense of wrongness in the air. A profound, unnatural quiet. The birds, Ash said, his voice low. Pikachu's ears were flat against his head, his body tense. Cynthia nodded, her gaze sweeping the sky. There are none. We should be hearing wind gull, Polyper, but there's nothing. They disembarked, their boots crunching on the gravelly soil. They had brought only their core teams. 6 Pokémon each. The rest were in the care of Professor Oak, a precaution they had both agreed on. This was an unknown, and they were not taking any chances. They walked north, towards the edge of the silent zone. The transition was not gradual. It was a line, as clear and defined as if it had been drawn on a map. One moment, there was the whisper of wind in the trees and the distant crash of waves. The next, there was nothing. Absolute silence. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was a presence. A heavy, oppressive pressure that pushed in on them, trying to snuff out the very thoughts in their heads. It was a physical weight on Ash's aura, a suffocating blanket of null energy. He felt his own life force, his connection to the world, being dampened. Stay close, he said, his voice sounding strangely loud and flat in the dead air. He reached out, his hand instinctively finding hers. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was firm, a small point of reality in this sea of nothingness. Cynthia didn't pull away. She looked at their joined hands for a fraction of a second, her expression unreadable, before her focus returned to the path ahead. The pressure, it's disorienting. It's trying to drain us, Ash said, focusing his own aura, pushing it outward to form a small, shimmering bubble of resistance around them. The pressure eased slightly, the suffocating feeling receding to a dull throb. The effort was immense. It was like trying to hold back the entire ocean with his bare hands. I can shield us, but I don't know for how long. They moved into the silent zone, the world turning into a monochrome photograph. The trees were still standing, the grass was still there, but all the color had been leached out of it, leaving only shades of gray. It was a world with the life bled out. And then they saw them. A researcher, frozen in the act of examining a flower. Her hand was outstretched, her expression one of mild curiosity, her eyes wide and completely vacant. Her Pokémon, a cheerful Pachirisu, was perched on her shoulder, a nut held in its paws, its pose unnervingly lifelike. They were perfect statues. Not petrified, not frozen. Just, empty. Ash reached out a hand, his aura sense extending. He expected to feel cold, or death. He felt nothing. A complete void. The space where their life force, their souls, should have been was just an empty hole. He didn't kill them, Cynthia whispered, her voice a horrified breath. He erased them. The sight was more disturbing than any battlefield. It was a violation of the natural order on the most fundamental level. They continued on, passing more of the silent, gray statues. A technician slumped over a control panel. A cook in the cafeteria, a ladle held over a pot of petrified stew. Each one a silent testament to the horror that had unfolded here. The outpost itself was pristine, untouched. Doors were ajar, papers sat on desks, coffee mugs half full. It was as if everyone had simply vanished in the middle of a perfectly normal day. The epicenter should be the main research lab, Cynthia said, her voice tight. That's where the extra-dimensional energy studies were conducted. As they approached the central building, the pressure intensified. Ash gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his forehead. The effort of maintaining the aura shield was becoming a serious strain. He could feel that the nothingness clawing at the edges of his defense, hungry and persistent. The doors to the main lab slid open automatically, their motion eerily silent. The room was circular, dominated by a massive, inert piece of machinery in the center. Consoles and monitors lined the walls, all displaying the same frozen data streams. And in the middle of the room, standing before the central machine, was a creature. It was a Walrein. But it was wrong. This was no ordinary Pokémon. It was an alpha, far larger than any Walrein Ash had ever seen, its tusks like ivory spears. But its eyes were the most terrifying part. They were not eyes. They were pits of absolute blackness, voids that seemed to drink the very light. Its body, instead of being a healthy blue, was a sickly, mottled gray, and a faint, shimmering aura of black static, the opposite of Ash's blue light, clung to it like a shroud. A null-touched Pokémon, Ash breathed, recognizing the same anti-energy Lysander had hinted at. The Walrein turned its head, its movement stiff and unnatural. Its black hole eyes fixed on them. It didn't roar. It didn't make a sound. But a wave of pure, crushing despair washed over them, so potent it made Ash's shield flicker violently. Garchomp, let's go. Cynthia commanded, her voice cutting through the oppressive silence. She threw her pokeball, and her ace materialized, roaring a challenge that was immediately swallowed by the dead air. Pikachu, you're with me. Ash said, his partner leaping from his shoulder, cheeks already crackling. Garchomp, Dragon Claw. Cynthia ordered. Garchomp shot forward, its scythe-like claws glowing with draconic energy. It slashed at the Walrein, a move that should have torn through steel. The claws made contact, but there was no impact. The draconic energy simply fizzled out. It was like striking a ghost. The dragon claw dissipated into nothingness a centimeter from the Walrein's hide, the black, static-like aura around the creature absorbing the attack completely. Garchomp stumbled, thrown off balance by the lack of resistance. What? Cynthia gasped, her composure finally breaking. Its aura negates attacks. Ash realized, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying clarity. It's not a shield, it's a void. It unmakes energy. The null Walrein retaliated. It opened its mouth, but instead of an ice beam or a blizzard, it unleashed a wave of pure, silent blackness. It wasn't an attack you could see or dodge. It was a wave of pure entropy. Garchomp was caught in the wave and cried out, a sound of agony and confusion. Its powerful body seemed to dim, its colors fading, its movements becoming sluggish. The null wave was draining its life force directly. Garchomp, return. Cynthia yelled, recalling her struggling Pokémon before it could be fully drained. She was shaken. Her strongest Pokémon had been neutralized without landing a single blow. This was a type of battle she had never even conceived of. Pikachu, Thunderbolt. Ash yelled. Pikachu unleashed a massive bolt of lightning. It tore through the silent room, a brilliant spear of yellow, and then it vanished, absorbed by the Walrian's oppressive shroud of nothingness. The attack didn't even cause a flicker. The Walrein turned its empty gaze to Pikachu. It was learning. It had identified them as the source of the resistance. It lumbered forward, its silence more terrifying than any roar. "It's a puppet," Ash said, his mind racing, trying to find a strategy where all his normal strategies were useless. He could feel the strain on his own body, the aura shield weakening with every passing second. The creature isn't alive. It's being controlled. Lysander is using it as a conduit for this null energy. If we can't hurt it with abilities, then what can we do? Cynthia asked, her hand already on her next pokeball. We have to break the connection, Ash decided, his eyes narrowing. It's not the Walrein we're fighting. It's the nothingness itself. We can't destroy it, but maybe, we can sever it. It was a desperate gamble, a theory based on a gut feeling. We need to hit it from two sides at once. Overwhelm its ability to negate everything. Your Pokémon provides the physical force, mine will provide the opening. A pincer attack, Cynthia said, her tactical mind immediately grasping the concept. But how do we create an opening if all our attacks are useless? My attack won't be an attack, Ash said, a wild, dangerous idea forming. He looked at Pikachu. Buddy, I need you to trust me. I'm going to use my aura, but not to attack it. I'm going to use it to blind it. Create a flash of life so bright it can't absorb it all at once. It'll be for just a second, but it should be enough. He looked at Cynthia, his eyes burning with intensity. You need to be ready. The second you see the flash, you strike. Aim for the head. That's where the strings would be. It was a crazy plan, relying on timing that was next to impossible. But they had no other choice. Cynthia gave a sharp, decisive nod. The doubt was gone from her face, replaced by the fierce determination of a champion. She trusted him. Togekiss, I need your grace, she called, throwing her Pokeball. Her elegant, flying-type Pokémon appeared, its cheerful disposition a stark contrast to the oppressive gloom. All right, Pikachu, get ready. Ash said, planting his feet. He closed his eyes, shutting out the horrifying sight of the Walrein and the empty lab. He focused inward, gathering his strength. The null energy was clawing at him, trying to seep into his mind, whispering of the peace of oblivion. He ignored it. He focused on his bond with Pikachu, on the warmth, the light, the decades of shared friendship. He gathered it all up, a sun of pure life force in his chest. The Walrein was lumbering towards them, a silent engine of annihilation. Togekiss, prepare to use extreme speed. Cynthia commanded, her voice steady. Now, Ash thought. He opened his eyes, and they were glowing with a brilliant, azure light. He shoved his aura forward, not into an attack, but into a raw, unfiltered broadcast of pure existence. Pikachu, flash, he roared. Pikachu's body erupted, not with electricity, but with pure, blinding white gold light. It was the condensed power of Ash's own soul, channeled through his most trusted partner. It was not an attack designed to do damage. It was a declaration. It was the word, I am, screamed into a universe of, I am not. The effect was instantaneous. The null Walrein's shroud of black static flared violently as it tried to absorb the impossible onslaught of pure life energy. For a single, critical half-second, the void was overwhelmed. The creature's empty eyes flickered, and a high-pitched, unphysical shriek of static echoed in their minds, the sound of the puppet master's connection being disrupted. Now, Cynthia. Ash bellowed, the effort making his vision swim. Togekiss, strike. Cynthia screamed. Togekiss, already a blur of motion, dove. Wreathed in the white light of extreme speed, it became a living missile. It didn't use a special attack that could be negated. It used its own physical body, a simple, brutal, physical impact. It slammed into the Walreen's head with a sickening crunch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the black, static aura around the Walreen sputtered and died. The empty pits of its eyes flickered, and a faint, confused blue light returned to them. The creature shuddered, a low, mournful groan escaping its lips, the first real sound it had made. It was no longer a puppet. It was just a confused, wounded Walreen. It swayed on its feet for a second before collapsing to the ground, unconscious. The moment it fell, the pressure in the room vanished. The suffocating silence was replaced by the low hum of the lab's machinery. The color began to seep back into the world, the dull gray of the walls and consoles returning to their normal hues. Outside, a distant chirping could be heard. A single starly. Ash staggered, a wave of dizziness washing over him. The exertion of projecting so much aura had left him drained, his head throbbing. He leaned against a console for support, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Cynthia was at his side in an instant, her hand on his arm, her face etched with concern. "Ash. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," he managed, shaking his head to clear it. "Just, tired." "We did it." They had. They had faced an enemy that operated on principles they didn't understand, and through a combination of his insane power and her flawless execution, they had won. They stood there for a long moment, in the center of the silent lab, surrounded by the ghosts of the fallen researchers. The victory felt hollow, a small reprieve in a much larger, darker war. Cynthia's hand was still on his arm. Her touch was no longer just a point of contact in a crisis. It was grounding. He looked at her, at the concern in her gray eyes, and saw not the champion, not his political partner, but the woman who had just trusted him with her life, and the life of her Pokémon. The vow, the council, the world's expectations, all of it faded away. In that moment, they were just two people, alone against the dark. "Your plan was reckless, insane, and based on nothing more than a feeling," she said, her voice soft. "But it worked," he replied, a tired smile touching his lips. A small smile mirrored his on her face. It was the first genuine smile he had seen from her, free of irony or tactical calculation. It was beautiful. "Yes," she admitted. "It did." She looked around the lab, at the frozen figures, and her smile faded. "This was a test," she said, her voice turning grim. "Lysander was testing his new weapon. And he was testing you. He wanted to see how you'd react to his null energy. And now he knows," Ash finished, his gaze hardening. "He knows we can fight it." He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the next time they faced this power, it wouldn't be in the form of a single, lumbering puppet. Lysander had his data. And the real battle was yet to come. Far away, in his white sanctuary, Lysander watched a blank monitor, a faint trace of static, the only sign that his connection had been severed. He was not angry. He was intrigued. He brought a hand to his chin, his cold eyes alight with intellectual curiosity. "Fascinating," he murmured to the silent, black stone on its pedestal. He didn't try to overpower the null. He didn't try to destroy it. He blinded it. He weaponized life itself. A crude and emotional response, but unexpectedly effective. He paced the room, a predator analyzing new prey. He is a resource. A wellspring of the very energy my lord seeks to consume. But he can also fight back. This changes the parameters. He stopped, a new, colder smile touching his lips. He was a scientist who had just discovered a fascinating new variable in his experiment. The challenge excited him. The next test will have to be more personal, he decided. It's not enough to simply drain the world around him. To truly break him, to make him understand the futility of his chaotic emotions, I must take something from him. Not his power. Not his life. He looked at the black stone, his eyes gleaming with a terrible, brilliant idea. His hope. Chapter 5, the Heretic's Gambit. The return from Outpost Epsilon was a somber affair. The world felt louder now, the colors more vibrant, but the memory of the silent, grey statues was burned into their minds. Ash and Cynthia delivered their report to the Champions Council via a secure channel from the jet. The mood was grim. They had presented the null-touched Walrian's poke ball, now inert and empty, as evidence, along with their analysis of the null energy and their strong suspicion of Lysander's involvement. The reaction was a mixture of horror and grudging respect. Lance, for all his bluster, was a protector at heart. The idea of a weapon that didn't just defeat, but erased life, shook him to his core. Stephen was already mobilizing his company's R&D department to analyze the data, his scientific curiosity warring with his dread. Diantha was pale, seeing the potential for mass tragedy on a scale she couldn't comprehend. "Your probationary status is maintained," Lance had decreed, his voice lacking its earlier fire. "But your mandate has changed. You are no longer just investigating an anomaly. You are now the primary task force for investigating and combating this null threat. Find Lysander. Find his source. And stop him. You are authorized to use any means necessary." It was a victory, but it felt like a declaration of war. They were no longer just political liabilities, they were soldiers on the front line. They landed not at a public airport, but at a private airstrip just outside Lumio City. It was Cynthia's choice. "Lysander's power base is in Kalos," she'd explained. "His rhetoric about logic and a new world order resonates with the more technologically minded factions here. If we're going to find him, this is the place to start." The air in Kalos was different from Sinoa's stark purity. It was alive, filled with the scent of fashion, food, and ambition. They were set up in a secure penthouse suite at the top of a hotel overlooking the Lumio skyline, the Prism Tower a glittering needle in the heart of the city. It was another gilded cage, but this time it felt less like a prison and more like a command center. The news was a firestorm. The League had released a heavily redacted statement about a new energetic threat discovered in Sinnoh, and that Monarch Ash and Champion Cynthia were leading the investigation. The narrative of their battlefield marriage was swiftly being overwritten by a new one, the power couple, the two strongest trainers in the world, united against a shadowy new enemy. It was exactly the kind of story the media loved, and it was a narrative Lysander could not allow to stand. He didn't wait long. The day after they arrived, every screen in Lumio City, every billboard, every public terminal, every poketch, flickered and changed. The smiling faces of models and the flashy logos of corporations were replaced by a single, stark image, Lysander, standing in his silent, white room. His expression was calm, his voice smooth and reassuring as he began to speak. It was a global broadcast, a hijacking of the world's media infrastructure on an unprecedented scale. "Citizens of the world," he began, his charismatic voice commanding instant attention. "For days, you have been fed stories of chaos and fear. You have been told of a new threat. You have been told to put your faith in the passionate, unpredictable power of your new monarch. I am here today to offer you not fear, but peace. Not chaos, but order." The screen behind him changed, showing footage of a rampaging Tyranitar, a wild Pokémon that had been causing destruction on the outskirts of the city. It was a scene of terror, roaring, smashing, its rage a force of nature. "Your leaders would meet this with force," Lysander said, his voice filled with a calm pity. "They would meet rage with more rage, creating a cycle of destruction. They believe emotion is a weapon. I am here to show you it is a disease. And I have the cure." Lysander himself then appeared on the screen, stepping onto the scene of the rampage. He was alone, unarmed, wearing his immaculate white suit. He walked towards the furious Tyranitar, which turned its rage-filled eyes on him and charged. The crowd in the footage screamed. Lysander simply raised a hand. A faint shimmer of black static, the same null energy Ash and Cynthia had faced, emanated from his palm. It wasn't an attack. It was a wave of calm, of less. As the wave washed over the Tyranitar, its furious roar died in its throat. Its charge slowed, its muscles losing their tension. The fiery red light in its eyes dimmed, replaced by a placid emptiness. It skidded to a halt just feet from Lysander, its massive head bowed, suddenly as docile as a lamb. It was alive, but its rage, its spirit, its very will to fight, had been drained away. "Behold," Lysander said, his voice echoing over the silent, awestruck crowd. "Not destruction. Not defeat. Peace. Absolute and perfect. This is the power of Null. The power to soothe the chaos of emotion, to bring order to a world tearing itself apart." The screen returned to Lysander in his white room. His expression was now severe, righteous. The power wielded by Ash Ketchum is the opposite of this. It is aura. It is the fuel of emotion. The rage of the Tyranitar is the same energy that won him his crown. It is a wildfire that he cannot control. His victory was not a triumph, it was a warning. A world governed by such chaos is a world on the brink of self-destruction. He then looked directly into the camera, his gaze piercing. "I am not a villain. I am a visionary. And I believe the world deserves a choice. Therefore, I formally challenge the world monarch, Ash Ketchum, to a sanctioned 3-on-3 battle. Here, in the heart of Lumio City. Let the world see our philosophies clash. Let them choose for themselves the future they want, a world of passionate, destructive chaos," his lip curled in distaste, "or a world of calm, controlled order." The broadcast ended. The screens flickered back to their regularly scheduled programming. But the damage was done. The world was silent, processing the heretic's gambit. He hadn't declared war. He had declared a debate, and the battlefield was its stage. "He's brilliant," Cynthia said, her voice a low, furious whisper. She was pacing the suite, her hands clenched into fists. "He's not trying to conquer the world. He's trying to convert it. He's positioned himself as a savior, and Ash as a walking natural disaster. He's also given us exactly what we wanted," Ash said. He was sitting on the couch, Pikachu on his lap, his expression unervingly calm. "A chance to face him. A chance to expose him." "It's a trap, Ash," Cynthia warned, stopping to face him. "This isn't a normal battle. He's not trying to win by knockout. He's trying to win the argument. He'll use his null power to make your Pokémon look like uncontrolled monsters, while his will seem like perfect, obedient soldiers. He'll win the war of public opinion even if he loses the match." "I know," Ash said, looking up at her. His eyes were clear and focused. "That's why I'm not going to play his game." The battle was set for 2 days later, in the grand arena at the base of the Prism Tower. The world's attention was focused on Lumio City. It was more than a battle, it was an ideological referendum. The day of the fight, the atmosphere was electric. The stadium was packed, but the crowd was strangely subdued, uncertain of who to cheer for. Ash walked onto the field, the roar that greeted him hesitant, mixed with murmurs of apprehension. He wore his usual battle attire, a stark contrast to Lysander, who emerged onto the opposite side of the field looking like a pristine angel of order in his white suit. "Welcome, Monarch Ketchum," Lysander said, his voice amplified throughout the stadium. "Are you ready to show the world the true face of your power?" "I'm ready to show them the truth," Ash countered, his voice steady. The referee announced the rules. A standard 3-on-3. The battle began. Lysander's first Pokémon was an Aegislash. But it was different. Like the Walrein, its colors were muted, and a faint, almost invisible shroud of null energy clung to it. It moved with an eerie silence, its blade and shield shifting formations with a cold, mechanical precision. Ash chose Hawlucha. The battle was a flurry of motion. Hawlucha, all passion and flamboyant pride, attacked with a ferocious flying press. But as the attack neared the Aegislash, its power seemed to evaporate. The blow landed with a dull thud instead of a bone-jarring crash. The Aegislash retaliated with a shadow claw that was unnaturally fast and precise, leaving a deep gash on Hawlucha's wing. "You see?" Lysander's voice boomed. "Passion is inefficient. It is wasted energy. My Pokémon fights with perfect economy, its will perfectly aligned with mine. There is no waste." Ash watched, his jaw tight. Cynthia had been right. Every attack Hawlucha made was being dampened, while the Aegislash's attacks were brutally efficient. Hawlucha was fighting with the heart of a lion, but it was being bled dry, its spirit sapped by the constant, draining presence of the null. With a final, perfectly placed strike, the Aegislash knocked Hawlucha out. A wave of uneasy murmurs rippled through the crowd. Lysander's point was being made for him. Ash's passionate Pokémon had been defeated by cold, efficient logic. Ash recalled Hawlucha, whispering a word of thanks. His next choice was a surprise. Goodra. His gentle, affectionate dragon. An interesting choice, Lysander commented, a smug smile on his face. A creature known for its gentle nature. Will you force it to become a monster to try and defeat me? Goodra doesn't have to be a monster, Ash said. It just has to be itself. The battle was bizarre. Goodra used Rain Dance, summoning a downpour that washed over the field. It didn't attack. It simply stood there, its gooey body seeming to absorb the rain, its expression placid. The Aegislash attacked again. And again, its blade flashing. But its strikes, while precise, had little effect on Goodra's amorphous body. Goodra, in turn, used Bide, absorbing the energy of the attacks. What is he doing? Cynthia whispered from the sidelines where she was watching, her knuckles white. He's just letting it take damage. But Ash was doing something else. He wasn't commanding. He was communing. He was pouring his aura, his calm, reassuring presence, into Goodra, reinforcing its gentle nature, shielding its spirit from the null's draining effect. He was fighting a defensive battle not on the field, but in the heart of his Pokémon. After taking several hits, Goodra's Bide was ready. It unleashed the stored energy, not as a furious blast, but as a wide, gentle wave of power that washed over the Aegislash. The null shroud around the ghost sword flickered violently, unable to fully negate an attack that had no malice, no anger, only a release of stored energy. The Aegislash was thrown back, damaged for the first time. Ash had proven a point. Gentleness could also be a weapon. But the effort had taken a toll on Goodra. Lysander, ever the pragmatist, recalled his Aegislash and sent out his next Pokémon, a massive, null-touched Metagross. With one powerful, calculated meteor mash, it defeated the weary Goodra. 2 Pokémon down. The crowd was on the edge of their seats. Ash's strategy was noble, but it wasn't winning. It is time to end this, Monarch, Lysander said, his voice laced with finality. Show them your ace. Show them the uncontrollable beast you revealed in the Kalos League. Show them the chaos you call a bond. He was baiting him. He wanted Ash Greninja. He wanted the public to see the wild, frenetic power and be afraid of it. Ash took a deep breath. He reached for his final Pokeball. Let's go, Greninja. Greninja appeared on the field, its presence instantly changing the atmosphere. It was sleek, silent, and deadly serious. The connection between them snapped into place, a familiar, powerful surge. Ash could feel Lysander's Metagross, a cold, calculating intelligence, a fortress of psychic power and steel. Not yet, Ash projected to Greninja. Hold back. Let him think he's in control. The battle began. Greninja was a blur of motion, its water shurikens flying. But just as before, the Metagross's null aura dampened their effectiveness. The psychic steel behemoth was an immovable object, its attacks calculated to perfection, forcing Greninja onto the defensive. It was a masterclass in control versus a masterclass in agility. It's not enough. Lysander taunted. Your power is being neutralized. You cannot win with these half measures. Unleash it. Show them the monster. Or will you let your Pokémon be destroyed for the sake of your pride? He was right. At this rate, Greninja would be worn down and defeated. Ash could feel the crowd's anxiety, their doubt. He could feel Cynthia's desperate will for him to win. He closed his eyes. He let all of it in. The fear, the doubt, the hope. He didn't push it away. He embraced it. He let it flow into the bond between him and Greninja. Okay, buddy, he thought, a fierce, determined grin spreading across his face. He wants a show. Let's give him one. Let's go, Greninja. Full power, he roared. The vortex of water erupted, and the transformation completed in a flash. Ash Greninja stood tall, the giant water shuriken on its back glowing with an intense light. The power radiating from it was immense, a palpable wave of passion and battle-lust. The crowd gasped. This was the chaotic power Lysander had warned them about. Yes. There it is. Lysander cried, his voice triumphant. The beast unleashed. Metagross, show them the folly of such emotion. Psychic. A wave of psychic energy, amplified by the null, shot towards Greninja, designed to crush its mind. But Ash was ready. He didn't just share Greninja's senses anymore. He poured his own consciousness into the bond. It wasn't just Ash Greninja fighting. It was Ash fighting. Don't block it. Go under it, Ash thought, and Greninja moved. With a fluidity that was breathtaking. It dropped into a slide, passing beneath the psychic wave, and came up spinning, its legs glowing for an aerial ace. The battle became a spectacle of impossible speed and power. Ash Greninja was no longer just a fast Pokémon, it was a force of nature. It moved not with the logic of a fighter, but with the intuition of a master, every move flowing into the next. It was the physical embodiment of Ash's battle sense. But Metagross was a fortress. It endured the assault, its null aura weakening Greninja's attacks just enough, its own counterattacks brutally precise. It was a war of attrition. It's still not enough. Lysander yelled, a frantic edge now in his voice. He had expected the raw power to be sloppy, chaotic. He had not expected it to be so precise. Your emotions will betray you. Metagross, Giga Impact. The Metagross began to glow, gathering an immense amount of physical energy. It was a final, all-or-nothing charge. He's giving you an opening. Cynthia yelled from the sideline. The recharge. You have to survive this. Ash knew. He felt the desperation from Lysander, the man's frustration that his opponent wasn't behaving as the models predicted. And in that frustration, he found his opening. It wasn't in the recharge after the attack. It was in the attack itself. He thinks we'll try to dodge, Ash realized. He thinks we'll meet force with force. He doesn't understand. He didn't shout a command. He projected a single, radical, insane idea to Greninja. An idea born not of strategy, but of absolute, unbreakable trust. As the giga-impacting Metagross became a living meteor, hurtling towards them, Greninja did something no one expected. It pulled the giant water shuriken from its back. But it didn't throw it. It braced itself. What is he doing? The announcer screamed. At the last possible second, as the Metagross was about to hit, Greninja spun the shuriken, not to attack, but to parry. It was a move of impossible timing and precision. The edge of the spinning water blade met the Giga Impact at an oblique angle. It was the single most audacious move in the history of Pokémon battling. It was like trying to deflect a freight train with a spinning top. The result was an explosion of steam and a deafening screech of protesting energy. The Giga Impact wasn't stopped. It was redirected. The Metagross was sent careening off course, its own immense momentum used against it. It slammed into the stadium wall with the force of a bomb, the null aura around it shattering like glass. The stadium was in absolute, stunned silence. Greninja stood panting, the shuriken on its back gone, completely expended in the maneuver. The Metagross was slumped against the wall, unconscious. Ash had won. But he had done it in a way no one could have predicted. He hadn't overwhelmed Lysander with chaos. He had outthought him. He had used his passionate, unpredictable bond to achieve a level of precision and trust that Lysander's cold logic could never hope to match. He had not just won the battle. He had won the argument. Lysander stared, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated disbelief. His perfect theory, his entire worldview, had been shattered by an act of beautiful, insane trust. The crowd, silent for a moment, began to cheer. It started small, then grew into a deafening roar. They weren't cheering for the monarch. They were cheering for Ash. For the bond he represented. Faced with public adoration for the very thing he despised, Lysander's composure finally broke. A snarl of pure hatred twisted his features. He recalled his Metagross, turned, and strode from the field without a word, disappearing into the tunnels beneath the stadium. He had been publicly humiliated. And a man like Lysander would not forgive that. As Ash recalled Greninja, his own transformation receding, he felt a wave of exhaustion. The battle had taken everything out of him. He looked up and saw Cynthia running onto the field, her face alight with a look of such fierce pride and relief that it took his breath away. She didn't stop until she was right in front of him. And without a word, she threw her arms around him, a tight, desperate hug in the center of the stadium, in front of the entire world. "You did it," she whispered into his shoulder, her voice thick with emotion. "You magnificent, reckless fool, you did it." Ash, surprised for a moment, slowly wrapped his own arms around her. In the roar of the crowd, surrounded by victory, he realized something. This felt more real, more important, than the crown he had won. It felt like home. The backlash from the battle was monumental. The null energy, the murmuring void as some commentators were now calling it, was real. And Lysander was its prophet. His escape from the stadium triggered a global manhunt. But he had vanished without a trace. In the distortion world, the second, larger surge of aura from Ash's battle with Lysander sent another, more violent shockwave through reality. The crack on the crystalline prison widened, splintering into a web of fissures. The whisper of nothingness that had been seeping out became a steady, silent bleed. Giratina roared in frustration and fear. The seal was failing faster than it had anticipated. The void's influence was growing, no longer just a passive leak, but an active presence. Across the human world, legendary Pokémon began to stir. In the depths of the ocean, Kyogre's slumber was disturbed by a cold, dead current it had not felt in millennia. High in the ozone layer, Rayquaza sensed a void in the planet's life force, a hole in the tapestry it was sworn to protect. And on Mount Coronet, at the Spear Pillar, the two masters of time and space felt the wound most acutely. Dialga felt a stutter in the flow of eternity, a moment where time itself seemed to thin. Palkia felt a pucker in the fabric of space, a point of infinite density that should not exist. They were stirring from their long slumber, their ancient instincts telling them that a primordial enemy, one they had faced alongside their creator, was beginning to wake. The world was holding its breath, and the gods were starting to open their eyes. Chapter 6, Echoes of the First Dawn. The victory in Lumio City was a double-edged sword. It had exposed Lysander and swung public opinion firmly in their favor, but it had also driven their enemy underground. In the week that followed, the world held its breath. A global task force, led by Lance and Steven, hunted for any trace of Lysander or his operations, but the man was a ghost. He had prepared for this contingency, his network of shell corporations and hidden safehouses proving infuriatingly effective. There were no more null zones, no more grand pronouncements. Just a terrifying, ringing silence. Ash and Cynthia found themselves in a strange limbo. They were heroes, celebrated for their victory, yet they were also the designated watchers, waiting for the other shoe to drop. The penthouse in Lumio City, once a command center, now felt like a cage again. The constant threat, combined with the lack of action, was a corrosive mix. It was Cynthia who broke the stalemate. She had spent days buried in research, cross-referencing her historical texts with the data from Outpost Epsilon and the energy readings from the battle. She had a theory, a wild and desperate one. "We're fighting a shadow," she said one evening, looking up from her datapad, her eyes tired but burning with a familiar intensity. "We're chasing Lysander, but he's just the prophet. The real enemy is the null, the void itself. We don't understand what it is, where it comes from, or how to fight it. We're swatting at smoke. So what do we do?" Ash asked. He was sitting by the window, idly scratching a purring Pikachu behind the ears, watching the lights of the city. He felt like a coiled spring, wound so tight he was about to snap. "We stop chasing the shadow and we go to the source of the light," she said, standing up. "Your aura. It's the only thing that has proven effective against the null. But you're just one person, wielding a power you don't fully understand. The legends of Sinnoh speak of the first Aura Guardians, of Sir Aaron. They faced a great darkness. What if it was the same one? What if the answers to fighting the null are hidden in the history of Aura itself?" Her logic was undeniable. He had always treated his aura as an instinct, a part of his bond with his Pokémon. He had never sought to understand its origins. "Where would we even look?" he asked. "There's only one place," she replied, a new map appearing on her datapad. It was a remote corner of Kanto, a place shrouded in mist and legend. The Tree of Beginning. The name sent a jolt through Ash. He remembered the place vividly, a colossal, crystalline organism that was a nexus of the world's life force. He had been there years ago, had almost sacrificed himself to save it, and had communed with the spirit of Sir Aaron himself through a time flower. "Lucario," he murmured, looking at the poke ball on his belt. His Lucario, the descendant of Sir Aaron's own, had a deep connection to that place. "It's a place of immense life energy, a focal point for the world's aura," Cynthia explained, her excitement palpable. "If there are answers to be found, they will be there. And more importantly," she added, her voice softening, "your power resonated with it before. Perhaps going back will awaken something. A memory. A history passed down through your bloodline." It was a long shot, but it was better than waiting in a hotel room for the world to end. They informed Lance of their plan. The champion was hesitant, wary of them leaving the grid, but even he had to admit they had no other leads. He granted them permission, on the condition they maintain regular contact. The journey to the Tree of Beginning was profoundly different from their flights to Windon or Lumios. They took a rugged, all-terrain vehicle as far as they could, then set out on foot, traveling through the misty, ancient forests that surrounded the sacred site. The omnipresent eyes of the media were gone. The political pressure faded into the background. It was just them, their Pokémon, and the wilderness. The silence here was different from the dead silence of the Null Zone. It was a living quiet, filled with the rustle of leaves, the whisper of wind, and the distant calls of wild Pokémon. It was peaceful. For the first time since that fateful battle, Ash felt the tension in his shoulders begin to unwind. They walked for hours, their conversation easy and unforced. They talked about their childhoods, their first Pokémon, the battles that had defined them. Ash spoke of his endless journey, the friends he'd made, the simple joy of discovery. Cynthia, in turn, shared stories of a lonely childhood spent buried in books. Of the immense pressure to be perfect, of the solitude that came with being the untouchable champion. "I used to envy trainers like you," she admitted as they sat by a campfire one night, watching the sparks dance into the starry sky. "You seemed so free. You battled with such joy, such passion. For me, battling was always a science. A problem to be solved. I was the best because I was flawless. But I was never truly happy doing it. But you love your Pokemon, Ash said, looking at her Garchomp, who was sleeping peacefully near the fire. I do, she confirmed, a soft smile on her face. They were my only real friends for a long time. But I always held a part of myself back. The champion couldn't afford to be sentimental. She couldn't afford to be anything but perfect. She looked at him, her gray eyes reflecting the firelight. Watching you battle, it reminded me of what I'd lost. Or perhaps, what I'd never allowed myself to have. He found himself telling her things he rarely spoke of. He told her about the visions, the moments where he connected with legendary Pokemon, the strange feeling that he was part of something much bigger than just the Pokemon League. He told her how his aura felt, not like a weapon, but like a constant hum beneath his skin, a connection to the life in everything around him. I always thought it was just because I love Pokemon so much, he admitted, looking at his hands as if seeing them for the first time. I never thought about where it came from. It's just, me. It is you, she said, her voice soft. But it's also more than you. It's a legacy. As they drew closer to the tree, the ambient life force became a palpable presence. The air grew thick with it, a sweet, vibrant energy that made the Pokemon restless and alert. Ash's own aura responded, humming in tune with the world around him. He felt at home. The Tree of Beginning was even more magnificent than he remembered. A colossal, mountain-sized formation of pink crystal that pulsed with a gentle, internal light, it was the heart of the planet made manifest. They found the entrance near the base, a glowing cave that led into the tree's interior. Inside, the air was warm and alive. Crystalline structures pulsed with soft light, and the very walls seemed to breathe. Ash released his Lucario, who immediately knelt, placing a paw on the crystalline floor, its eyes closed in concentration. It can feel it, Ash whispered. The history. The memories. As they ventured deeper, following Lucario, Ash felt a strange dizziness. The air grew thick, shimmering. The pulsing lights of the crystals began to form patterns, images that danced at the edge of his vision. He heard whispers, not in his ears, but in his mind, fragments of conversations, cries of battle, words in a language he didn't know but somehow understood. Ash? Cynthia's voice sounded distant. She put a hand on his shoulder to steady him. What's happening? The tree. He gasped, leaning against a crystal wall. It's remembering. For me. He pressed his hand against the crystal, and the world dissolved. He was no longer in the cave. He was standing on a windswept battlefield under a blood-red sky. Armies of men in ancient armor clashed, their Pokemon fighting with a savage fury he had never witnessed. But they were not fighting each other. They were fighting shadows. Amorphous, indistinct shapes of pure blackness that swarmed the battlefield, their touch draining the life from everything they contacted. The Null. A man stood at the center of the battle, a tall staff in his hand, a Lucario at his side. He wore blue robes, and his face, though different, held the same determined set to its jaw as Ash's own. Sir Aaron. But this was not the heroic image from the legends. This Aaron was grim, weary, his face etched with desperation. He was not winning. He was holding the line. He and his fellow guardians, a small cadre of men and women who shone with the same blue aura, were the only thing standing between the army of life and the tide of nothingness. The vision shifted. Ash was now inside a great hall, the same one from the legend of Sir Aaron. But it was a war council. Aaron was arguing with a king, a queen. We cannot defeat it. Aaron's voice echoed in Ash's mind, filled with a terrible certainty. The murmuring void is not an army to be fought. It is an absence. It is entropy. To fight it is to feed it our rage, our fear. It consumes all emotion, all life. So we are to do nothing, the king demanded. We are to let this silence consume our world. No, Aaron said, his voice dropping. We cannot destroy it. But we can contain it. We can build a prison. A seal of pure life force, powered by the tree of beginning itself. But the cost will be everything. The vision shifted one last time. Ash saw Aaron at the heart of the tree, just as he had in the time flower. He saw him channel all of his aura, all of his life force, not into a weapon, but into a lock. He saw him sacrifice himself, not to destroy the void, but to imprison it. His Lucario, in an act of supreme loyalty, joined him, their combined life force creating the final, unbreakable seal. Ash's vision was flooded with a single, terrifying understanding passed down from his ancestor. The murmuring void was never defeated. It was a fundamental force of the universe, the opposite of aura, the opposite of life itself. Creation, Arceus's great act, had also given birth to its own negation. Aaron hadn't been a hero who won a war, he had been a warden who built a prison and sacrificed himself to become the lock. And Ash's power, the monumental surge of life force he had unleashed in his battle against Cynthia, had been the key that had cracked that lock. He stumbled back from the crystal wall, gasping, the vision fading. He was back in the cave, the concerned face of Cynthia filling his vision. He was on his knees, his body trembling. "Ash," she cried, kneeling beside him. "What did you see?" "Everything," he breathed, his voice hoarse. "I saw everything. We were wrong. This isn't a new threat. It's an old one. An ancient one. And I'm the one who let it out." The guilt was a physical weight, crushing him. All this time he had been fighting, thinking he was the solution, when in fact he was the cause. His greatest strength was the world's greatest liability. Cynthia listened, her expression shifting from concern to awe to dawning horror as he recounted the vision. She didn't offer platitudes or easy comforts. She simply listened, her hand on his back, a silent, steady presence. When he was finished, a heavy silence filled the cavern. The truth of their situation was finally laid bare. They were not fighting a man. They were fighting the concept of nothingness itself, an enemy that could not be killed, only contained. And the one person with the power to do it was the very reason the prison was failing. "It's not your fault, Ash," she said finally, her voice soft but firm. "Isn't it?" he asked, his voice raw. "My power broke the seal. My battle, our battle, started all of this." "Your battle showed you had the power to face it," she corrected him gently. "The seal would have weakened eventually. Time erodes all things. Your power didn't create the problem, it revealed it. And it has given us a chance to face it. A chance Aaron never had. He could only imprison it. Maybe we can do more." He looked up at her, at the unwavering belief in her eyes. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't blaming him. She was looking at this impossible, cosmic horror, and she was already trying to find a way to win. In that moment, in the heart of the world, surrounded by the ghosts of the past and the terror of the future, the vow that had bound them, the political firestorm, the public spectacle, it all melted away, leaving only the raw, undeniable truth of their connection. The trials had forged them into allies, into partners. But this shared vulnerability, this moment of terrible truth, transformed them into something more. He saw not just a partner, but the one person who could stand with him in the face of oblivion and not flinch. She saw not just a phenomenon, but a man carrying an impossible burden, who needed not a queen or a champion, but someone to share the weight. He reached out, his hand finding hers, their fingers lacing together. It wasn't a gesture of comfort. It was an anchor. "Cynthia," he said, his voice barely a whisper, the name feeling more real on his lips than ever before. "Ash," she replied, her voice just as quiet. There were no more words to be said. He leaned in, and she met him halfway. The kiss was not born of passion or romance in the traditional sense. It was a confirmation. A seal of its own. It was a desperate, profound, and absolute acknowledgement of the bond that had grown between them, a bond forged in the fires of battle, tempered by political intrigue, and now solidified in the face of an existential threat. It was a promise that whatever came next, they would face it together. They were no longer just allies by vow. They were a unit, heart and soul. And as they stood, their foreheads pressed together in the glowing heart of the tree of beginning, they both knew that their personal journey, and the war for the world's survival, had truly just begun. The awakening was felt across the globe. The sheer emotional and auric resonance of Ash's vision, combined with the final cementing of his bond with Cynthia, sent a pulse of pure, concentrated life force rippling out from the tree of beginning. Lysander, meditating in his hidden sanctuary, was thrown from his trance, gasping. He clutched the null stone, which was vibrating violently, emitting a low, hateful hum. What was that?" he hissed. The pulse of aura had felt like a physical blow, a wave of defiant life that momentarily disrupted his connection to the void. "He's getting stronger. He's learning." The fear he felt was quickly replaced by a cold, sharp anger. His enemy was adapting faster than he had anticipated. His plan to psychologically break Ash, to take away his hope, was now more critical than ever. But the pulse was felt by another, far greater entity. The murmuring void, its consciousness slowly coalescing as its prison crumbled, felt the pulse not as a blow, but as a beacon. A feast. It had been bleeding its influence into the world through the cracks, passively corrupting, with Lysander as its unwitting tool. But this was different. This was a direct, personal challenge. It focused its burgeoning will, a malevolent intelligence born of absolute nothingness. It no longer needed to seep. It could now reach. It bypassed Lysander, its loyal but limited prophet. It sought a vessel of immense power, a being of legend that lay dormant, a part of the world's ancient immune system. Deep within a frozen cavern at the northernmost point of the Sinnoh region, a colossal shape lay sleeping among pillars of ancient ice. Its body was a patchwork of rock, ice, and magma, its limbs held close, its head bowed in a slumber that had lasted eons. It was a guardian, a shaper of continents, a being of immense physical power, placed in slumber by its creator once its great work was done. Regigigas. A tendril of pure, silent nothingness, invisible and intangible, snaked its way down from the heavens, through miles of rock and ice. It touched the sleeping giant's head. There was no corruption. There was no battle of wills. The void did not seek to control. It sought to repurpose. It found the giant's core programming, its divine purpose: shape the land. Move the continents. Protect the world. The void offered a single, silent, insidious amendment. It changed one core concept. It did not redefine protection. It redefined the world. The giant's purpose was no longer to protect the planet. It was to protect the silence. Its ancient programming rebooted with this new, terrifying directive. To protect the silence, it must move the continents. It must reshape the land. It must erase the noisy, chaotic infestation of life that scarred its surface. The glowing lights on Regigigas's shoulders, which had been a placid blue, yellow, and red, flickered and died. When they relit a moment later, they were a uniform, horrifying, empty black. The colossal Pokémon's ancient eyes opened, and they were voids. The Guardian had awakened. Not as a protector of life, but as an engine of its annihilation. Chapter 7. When the heavens fall silent, the peace they found within the tree of beginning was a fragile, fleeting thing. The journey back was heavy with the weight of their new knowledge. They were no longer fighting a man, they were fighting the universe's natural tendency towards nothingness. Their kiss, a moment of profound connection, was not an ending but a beginning. It had sealed their personal alliance, but it had also painted a target on their backs for forces they were only just beginning to comprehend. They emerged from the mists of Kanto into a world teetering on a knife's edge. The silence from Lysander was more unnerving than his broadcasts. The global task force was finding nothing, chasing dead ends. The world was waiting for the other shoe to drop, and the suspense was a slow-acting poison. It was Dawn who called them, her face on the Poketch screen pale and frantic. Ash. Cynthia. You need to see this. The image she sent was from a live news feed in Sinnoh. The camera was shaking, the reporter's voice tight with panic. It was focused on Celestic Town. The small, ancient town, nestled in the heart of Sinnoh, famous for its historical ruins and deep connection to the legends of Dialga and Palkia, was the center of a developing nightmare. From the heart of the town's central ruins, a pillar of blackness was rising into the sky. It wasn't smoke or dark energy. It was a column of absolute void, a hole in the world that seemed to drink the very light of the afternoon sun. And from its base, a perfect circle of the same gray, life-draining null energy they had seen at Outpost Epsilon was expanding. Rapidly. It's not creeping anymore, Ash said, his voice grim. It's erupting. Celestic Town. Cynthia breathed, her hand flying to her mouth. The ruins there are a focal point, a place where the veil between dimensions is thin. It's a direct conduit to the spear pillar. He's not just creating a dead zone. He's attacking the heart of Sinnoh's legend. The situation escalated with terrifying speed. The null zone, which had taken hours to grow a few hundred meters at the outpost, was now swallowing kilometers of countryside every few minutes. It swept over forests, fields, and small villages, its edge a creeping wall of gray silence. Anything it touched, trees, Pokemon, people, was instantly drained, left as a colorless, empty husk. The effect was not just physical. The Lake Guardians, Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf, the embodiments of knowledge, emotion, and willpower, cried out. Their psychic connection to the living beings of Sinnoh was being severed, one by one, as the null zone expanded. The sudden loss of thousands of minds caused a psychic shockwave that rippled across the region. People miles away from the zone collapsed, struck by a wave of inexplicable dread, confusion, or apathy. The very spirit of the region was being extinguished. The Champions Council convened in an emergency holoconference, their faces grim. Lance, his voice stripped of all political pretense, was now a commander facing an invasion. All available champions and Elite Four members are mobilizing to Sinnoh, he declared, the map of the region behind him showing the horrifying spread of the Black Circle. Our primary objective is to establish a perimeter. We need to halt the expansion and evacuate the populace. We cannot allow this blight to consume the entire region. Stephen Stone's R&D teams were working frantically. The energy signature is off the charts, he reported, his usual calm demeanor strained. It's exponentially more powerful than what you encountered at the outpost. This isn't a test anymore. This is a full-scale attack. Ash, Cynthia, Lance said, his eyes locking on them. You are the only two who have faced this and survived. We will hold the line. Your mission is to get to the epicenter. Find the source of this eruption and shut it down. Whatever it takes. The orders were given. The world was finally moving as one. From Hoenn, Galar, Kalos, and beyond, jets carrying the world's most powerful trainers streaked towards Sinnoh. It was a global immune response to a planetary infection. Ash and Cynthia were already on their way, their jet pushing its limits as it raced towards the beleaguered region. They watched the live feeds, the horror mounting with every passing minute. They saw footage of trainers on the edge of the zone, trying to fight back. They watched as hyper beams and solar beams fizzled into nothingness against the encroaching wall of silence. They landed at a makeshift command post set up in the mountains south of the disaster zone, a chaotic hive of activity. League officials, military personnel, and ace trainers from across the globe were coordinating the evacuation and defense. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and fear. Lance met them personally, his face haggard. His Dragonite was by his side, its expression as grim as its master's. It's worse than we thought, he said without preamble, leading them to a command tent. The zone's expansion is accelerating. And null-touched Pokemon are emerging from it. Dozens of them. They're not just draining life anymore. They're attacking. On a monitor, they saw the battle. Hordes of gray, empty-eyed Pokemon, Ursaring, Staraptor, Luxray, were pouring from the silent zone, attacking the defensive line with a silent, relentless ferocity. The champions were holding them back, Steven's Metagross creating walls of steel, Diantha's Gardevoir unleashing psychic blasts, Leon's Charizard painting the sky with fire, but for every one they took down, 2 more emerged from the gray mist. It was a war of attrition they couldn't win. "We can hold them for a time," Lance said, his voice heavy. "But we are just treating the symptom. You have to get to the cause." "We're going in," Ash said, his voice a blade of pure resolve. Pikachu was on his shoulder, his body crackling with a low, steady current of blue-gold aura, a miniature sun holding back the encroaching night. Cynthia nodded, her hand resting on Garchomp's pokeball. Her face was a mask of cold fury. This was her home. Her people. Her history being erased. This was personal. As they prepared to depart, a figure stumbled out of the gray haze at the edge of the perimeter. It was a man in a tattered, formerly white suit, his silver hair disheveled, his face pale and gaunt. He collapsed to his knees, gasping, a hand clutching his chest. It was Lysander. Elite trainers immediately surrounded him, there. Pokemon ready to strike. But he didn't resist. He looked up, his eyes wide with a terror Ash had never thought to see in them. "You have to listen," he rasped, his voice weak and strained. "You don't understand. I was wrong." Ash and Cynthia pushed through the guards, stopping a few feet from him. Up close, Ash could see that Lysander's own life force was being drained. A faint, black static clung to him, but it wasn't his weapon anymore. It was a parasite, consuming him from the inside out. "I thought I was its prophet," Lysander choked out, a bitter, self-loathing laugh escaping his lips. "I thought I was guiding it, using its power to bring about a new age of order. But I was a fool. A tool. A key to open the door. It was never about order. It was only ever about silence." "What is at the center?" Cynthia demanded, her voice like ice. "What did you unleash?" "I didn't unleash it," Lysander said, shaking his head, a look of true madness in his eyes. "He did." He pointed a trembling finger at Ash. "Your power. Your life force. It didn't just crack the prison. It gave the void a focus. A consciousness. It's not just an instinctual force anymore. It's awake. And it has a will." He coughed, a racking, soul-deep cough that seemed to drain what little color was left in his face. "It has chosen a new vessel. A new avatar. A being of immense power, sleeping beneath Sinnoh. Its purpose was to shape the world. Now its purpose is to scour it clean." "What is it?" Ash pressed, a cold dread coiling in his stomach. Lysander looked at him, his eyes filled with a terrifying, lucid despair. "The legends call it the colossal Pokemon. The one who towed the continents into place. At the heart of that storm, you will not find a machine, or a source of energy. You will find a god. A corrupted god." His voice dropped to a barely audible whisper. "You will find Regigigas." The name landed with the force of a physical blow. Regigigas. The master of the legendary titans. A being whose physical strength was said to be immeasurable. If it had been turned, if its world-shaping power was now being used for world-breaking. "Why are you telling us this?" Cynthia asked, her suspicion warring with the horrifying implications of his words. "Because I have seen its mind," Lysander whispered, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on his cheek. "I have felt its purpose. There is no nuance. There is no philosophy. There is only the directive, erase. It will not stop with Sinnoh. It will not stop until the entire world is silent. My perfect, ordered world, it would be the first to burn. I was a fool who dreamed of a silent symphony, and I have unleashed a deafening void. He looked at Ash, a flicker of his old, arrogant self returning, now twisted into a desperate plea. Your chaotic, emotional aura, it is the only thing in this universe that is its true opposite. You are the only one who can stop it. You are the world's only, terrible hope. Ash stared at the broken man before him. His enemy. The man who had tried to destroy his reputation, who had unleashed this horror on the world. And now, he was their only source of intelligence. It was a bitter, impossible moral dilemma. Trust the architect of your potential destruction to save it. He made a choice. The only choice he could. Get him to the medical tent, he ordered the nearby guards. He's with us. Lance looked at him, his expression a mixture of shock and disbelief, but he didn't countermand the order. He trusted Ash's judgment. In the face of Armageddon, old enmities were a luxury they could no longer afford. Ash and Cynthia turned to face the roaring wall of silence. The fate of the world rested on them entering the heart of that storm and facing a corrupted god. Lucario, Garchomp, Pikachu, everyone, Ash said, addressing both his and Cynthia's teams, their pokeballs held ready. This is it. There's no strategy for this. There's no precedent. We're going into the heart of the void. The only thing that will get us through is our bond. Stay close. Fight. Together. And don't let the silence win. He took Cynthia's hand, his grip firm and reassuring. She squeezed back, her gray eyes meeting his, a universe of unspoken trust passing between them. They were a single unit, their strengths and weaknesses intertwined. Her brilliant mind, his impossible power. Together, they walked forward, stepping over the line. The world vanished. The pressure was 1,000 times worse than it had been at the outpost. It was a physical, crushing force, trying to extinguish their very existence. The sound of their own hearts, their own breathing, was gone. Ash immediately threw up his aura shield, a dome of brilliant blue-gold light that pushed back against the suffocating blackness. It was like holding up a mountain. The strain was immediate and immense, and blood trickled from his nose. Pikachu, Lucario, Greninja, and Sceptile stood back-to-back with Cynthia's Garchomp, Togekiss, Milotic, and Roserade. Each Pokémon was wreathed in a phantom-like coating of Ash's aura, a borrowed life force that protected them from the null's draining effect. They were an island of defiant life in an ocean of absolute nothingness. They pushed forward, into the silent, gray world. There were no husks here, no statues. Anything that had been caught in the initial eruption had been completely atomized, erased from existence. They were walking on a floor of smooth, gray dust. Above them, the pillar of void pulsed, a silent, black heart beating in the sky. And as they drew closer to the center, they saw it. It was a silhouette against the blackness, a shape so vast it defied comprehension. It stood taller than any building, its form a hulking, vaguely humanoid shape of rock and strange energy. The glowing patterns on its shoulders were not lights, but holes, patches of the same all-consuming void that surrounded them. Its eyes were two massive, empty pits of despair. It was Regigigas. But it was no longer the colossal Pokémon. It was the avatar of the void, a walking engine of annihilation. It stood motionless, its immense power fueling the expansion of the null zone. As they approached, it finally moved. It turned its massive head, its void-like eyes fixing on their small island of light. It did not register them as a threat. It registered them as an anomaly. A pocket of chaos in its new, perfect order. It raised a hand, a limb the size of a freight train. It did not gather energy. It did not prepare an attack. It simply pointed. And the nothingness converged. The void, which had been a passive pressure, became an active, crushing force, its entire focus aimed at their small shield of aura. Ash cried out, falling to one knee as the pressure increased 100-fold. His shield cracked, fissures of blackness appearing in the blue-gold light. I can't, Hold it, he gasped, his vision blurring. The avatar of the void had judged them. And it had found them wanting. It had passed its sentence. And the sentence was erasure. In the chaos of the command post, Lysander lay on a cot, a medical officer trying in vain to get a reading from her instruments. His vital signs were non-existent, yet he was still, impossibly, alive. He felt the moment the void focused its power on Ash. He felt the spike in its malevolent intent. He knew what was happening. Ash's shield was about to break. And when it did, the last hope of the world would be extinguished. With a final, desperate surge of will, he reached for the last dregs of his own power. The corrupted null energy that was consuming him. He had been its prophet. He still had a connection. He couldn't fight the void, but maybe, just maybe, he could distract it. He focused all of his being on one single, desperate act. An act of rebellion against the God he had worshipped. An act of redemption. He pushed his will through the connection, not as a command, but as a sliver of pure, chaotic data. A virus in the perfect system. A single, nonsensical thought aimed at the mind of the corrupted God. Error. Parameter missing. Order is incomplete. It was a desperate, meaningless gambit. But it was all he had left. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.